Greetings and welcome to my little corner of YouTube. My name is Lindsey Pogue. I am the author of Tide and Tempest, and you are about to listen to part 3, the last installment of the story. I am so excited for you guys to see how this ends. This story really gripped me and came very naturally and had a lot of surprises for me as I was writing it. So I'm hoping that there are some surprises in here for you as well. So without further ado, please enjoy this last installment of Tide and Tempest. The links below are to the first 2 parts if you need to start at the beginning. See you on the other side.
Chapter 31. I don't find my way back to the village until the clouds settle over the moon. My hair is a tangled mess from wandering the hillsides, and the wind has turned biting cold. I prefer it that way, though. The numbness is better than confusion and pain. I stare at my hand, clenching it as I make my way to the cottage. I can still feel it, the way my fist collided with Eric's jaw, the way my knuckles thrummed with pain, and yet I felt a heady sense of relief, followed by an unexpected pang of remorse. It all makes sense now. Eric's rage toward me, the way it has tempered over time but has left a chasm between us, the way he looks at me with a wild mixture of anger and regret. Only this time, I understand what fuels it. I've never wanted to kick his ass more than I do now, and yet, as much as I hate him for being so horrible, I understand it too. I feel that same grating sense of self-loathing whittling away at me, wishing every decision I'd made 6 years ago was different. Exhaling a much-needed breath, I stare at the cottage as it comes into view. It's mostly dark inside, save for the dying light of a waning fire. My eyes narrow on a shadow sitting on the bench outside the door as I draw closer. I wasn't sure if you'd come home. I freeze as my father's baritone reaches my ears. I wasn't sure either, I admit. He'd made himself scarce after I'd been mangled in the orchard, so that he's waiting for me after coming to verbal blows is unexpected, to say the least. I'm glad you did, he says. There are things to say. I stop in front of him. I tell myself I don't know how to talk to you, Samara. But the truth of it is, I won't admit how I feel, even to myself. I lean against the porch post, the dull pain in my shoulder easy enough to ignore. What does any of that mean? I ask, sighing because I'm too tired for riddles. It means words are my biggest failure when it comes to you. Instead of telling you how much I hate myself for leaving you alone after what happened to your mother, especially after I saw how distraught you were, I thought my actions and all that I've done in recompense would show you. But that was the coward's way. He runs his fingers through his beard, and I can almost hear him thinking of what he will say next. Can imagine the vulnerability I saw in his eyes only once before, that day in the scorched forest when he thought I would die in the lightning storm. It had been easy to convince myself I'd imagined it over the years, since my father had become a memory of harsh lines and disapproving words, not even a man anymore, but a ghost from the past. The truth is, he clears his throat as he stands, your mother would never forgive me for what I've put you through, and I will never forgive myself either. His eyes shimmer in the moonlight. Expanding an empire and traveling the seas, all of that is easier and far less terrifying than being here with you and every mistake I've made and can never take back. You are my daughter, Samara. Despite what I've allowed you to think, you're the only thing that matters to me. His words grab hold of the constant ache in my chest I can't seem to escape these days. They smother it with warmth and a terrifying sense of hope. Licking my lips, I stare at the closed cottage door. What about Issa and Raf? I whisper. I care about them, but you are my blood.
You are the only thing I have left of your mother, and I love you so much. It's frightened me since the day you were born. Everything has always been about my family, about her and you, even when it hasn't seemed like it.
I swallow the lump in my throat as he continues.
I've been so worried I'd lose you to storms and raiders. I've pushed you away, and
his voice cracks ever so slightly.
I know you don't believe me, but I've done this all for you. And if I've truly lost you, and there's no coming back from this mess I've made, then there is no reason for me to do any of this any longer.
It's just like my father, I'm learning, to blindside me with heart-wrenching truths. And while the angry girl in me wants to lash back at him, I can't. Not when I consider what the past years could have looked like had he not made it his mission to work toward more peace and safety for all of us.
I'm sorry, Samara,
he says again, and a garbled sob escapes my throat. I wipe the tears from my cheeks. Eric, my father, my mother, Link and Violet. I shake my head, feeling the well inside me bubble over. It's all too much. I cover my face with my hands, hating how weak I sound, and yet I feel so liberated at the same time, like I've finally burst and can breathe. I've wanted you to care for so long. I don't hear my father over the sound of my sobbing, but his fingers gently clasp my wrists.
Samara,
he croaks, dragging my hands away from my face. I blink at his shadowed outline, broad and looming over me. But it's not a fearful presence as much as an unexpectedly comforting one. The scent of wood smoke and ale wafts off him as his large palms cup my cheeks. His calloused thumbs brush the tears beneath my eyes, his left one lingering over my scars.
I'm sorry for this,
he rasps.
I'm sorry you have to wear this forever, because of me.
I shake my head, knowing it was my doing, even if it was in sheer desperation.
Listen to me,
he grinds out, his voice holding an edge of authority again.
Wear this as a badge of honor, Samara, not a mark of regret.
I blink at him. What?
Your mother would tell you that every single scar you bear is part of your shield and the making of your ilk.
I can't help but think of Eric's admission. Every wound feels open and raw all over again, and the tears well in my eyes anew. What if I told you, I start, taking a ragged breath, that she wasn't killed by raiders, not entirely. She fell on a blade, one of ours. She was wounded first. My father is silent a moment, and he wipes my cheek again before his hands fall to his sides.
I would say that no matter what happened to her, she died in battle because of horrible men, because of greed, because she was trying to protect the village, and there is great honor in that.
I nod and wipe my nose with the back of my arm.
I have lost some of the most heroic and strongest men I've ever met to infected hunting wounds and dysentery. I've watched men lose their footing and fall to their death during raids. It's not how they died that is remembered, but how hard they fought and how they lived. Is that not what you think about when you remember your mother, the woman she was, your memories of her?
Yes, I whisper, wiping at my cheeks again.
You are such a strong woman, Samara, and your mother and Gil are to thank for that. While I'm so proud, I'm sad that I can take no credit for it.
The regret is raw in his voice, and the daughter in me wants to comfort him and reassure him he's in me too, but I can't bring myself to say it. There's a creak inside the cottage, and I remember Issa and Raf are in there. I wipe at my face again, clearing my throat. I'm so tired of crying, I mutter, and run my fingers through my knotted hair. And I'm a mess.
Yes, well, it's been quite a day.
I huff a laugh. You could say that.
You should rest. Your best friend is getting married tomorrow.
I nod, beyond exhausted. But as my father and I stand in an expectant silence, matched only by the breeze, I feel as if there's more to say.
Go on,
He says and steps aside. Each step makes me feel lighter, and as I reach for the door latch, I stop. Father, I whisper, glancing over my shoulder. He turns to look at me. I'm glad you've come home. He pivots to fully face me.
So am I.
With that, I open the door and step inside, leaving my father to his thoughts. I don't see Raf, but Issa sits by the fire. She's not sewing or humming as I expected, but simply staring at it. Good night, I tell her. Issa doesn't spare me a glance or say a word, and while that stings a little, it's not wholly unexpected, and I make my way up the ladder to bed. Chapter 32. The longhouse is brimming with plucked lute strings, harmonizing flutes, and the hum of chatter and laughter. It's warm with all of the body heat, especially in my corset and tunic dress. I tug at the leather bindings, wondering if Issa tightened the buckled straps too tight, or if it's supposed to be so uncomfortable. I'm not sure I can even breathe as I attempt a deep inhale. Savory braised venison with rosemary is barely noticeable over the scent of the lavender bundles, interspersed along the tables between candlelight. But the spicy hint of mead hovering in the air is hard to miss as it sloshes over people's mugs as they cheers in celebration. Peering through the sea of people, I search for Link and Violet. I catch the purple buds of lavender and white plumes of baby's breath crowning her hair first. Then I spot Link, sitting beside her, and bored out of his mind as Violet chats with Rory at their table, and I head in that direction. The instant Link sees me, his brow lifts slightly with relief.
I'll be back,
he says. Violet frowns at him, but she looks beautiful with her long hair falling over her shoulders in dark waves, a striking contrast to the thick fabric of her cream-colored dress. Link plants a kiss on her forehead and practically leaps over to me.
Thank God for you,
he mutters into my ear. I wrap my arms around him, my fingers stroking the soft linen of his shirt.
They are talking about the best furs for blankets and vests.
He heaves out a breath. My smile is wide. Link still needs me, at least in some small capacity, and breathing him in, I squeeze him tighter. I realize he doesn't smell like my best friend anymore. He smells of lavender and mint, the way Violet always does, and instead of feeling any sort of loss with the realization, I'm happy for him. Congratulations, Link, I whisper.
You don't mean that.
He laughs and leans back, eyeing me skeptically. Yes, I promise, I do, because you love her, and that must mean there's something good about Violet. I jest, even if it's not obvious. Link's cheeks split into a proud grin.
Yes, I do love her, as infuriating as she is sometimes.
He peers over at his bride, her blue eyes bright in the torchlight. Violet must feel our eyes on her because her gaze shifts furtively between us. When it locks on me, however, she eyes me up and down. But I do my best to smile, a real smile, a truce. Violet seems to understand, and flashes me a tentative one in return before Rory tugs on her arm to reclaim her attention.
You want to know something unexpected about loving someone?
Link says wistfully. I want to tell him a few things come to mind, because Link will always be my first love, even if I've never told him how I truly felt. What's that? I ask instead.
There's an indescribable feeling in having someone who cares about you.
That wasn't what I expected him to say. What's that supposed to mean? I glower at the insult. Link snorts with amusement and waves my offended tone away.
Not the way you care about me, Mar.
My eyes widen, and I shove an invisible dagger into my heart. Wow, just twist it while it's in there, why don't you? He smiles a little, his eyes unfocused as he loses himself in thought.
You know what I mean. It's different,
He says.
I'm talking about someone who wants to share a life and be a partner. Someone to worry about you more than you worry about yourself. Someone who will let you worry about them in return,
He says pointedly. Before I can tell Link I worry about him all the time, he holds up his hand to stop me.
Not just someone you feel comfortable being with, but someone who makes you long to crawl into bed each night, who folds your trousers and leaves them on the trunk, knowing you can never find them when you're half asleep in the morning.
Even if they aren't meant to, Link's words hurt a little, and not because he and I will never have that together, but because I'm beginning to wonder if I will ever have it with anyone. I let him revel for a moment, and when Link refocuses, he looks at me with a small, somewhat hesitant smile.
I know.
He stops as he searches for the right words. The moment I realize where his mind is going, I blush.
I know the lines have always been blurred between us, Mar.
He says, and I wave his words away.
But,
he insists,
I do love you. I want you to be happy, and I know you will find the same thing one day. You deserve it.
My chest cinches tightly, and I don't think it's entirely the corset's fault. Once, I would have thought you were that for me. I admit for the first time aloud. Everyone else is admitting their truths, so I feel a need to share mine. Link's been my compass and true north all of my life. My shoulder to cry on, my constant comfort in so many ways. And while we've shared intimacy, our connection has always been an unspoken one. A solace, not a claiming. But every time Violet looks at me, I see it's different for her than it was for me. Link glances from me to his bride, his eyes lingering on her. The claim she stakes on you, the jealousy and fear I've always seen in her eyes, has always annoyed me. Until now. Link sighs playfully.
I am quite the catch.
I elbow him in the ribs and he grabs his side.
Ouch!
With a chuckle, he shakes his head, but there's a softness in his eyes, a sense of peace. That is, until he really looks at me.
Wait.
His eyes widen, and Link takes a step back.
You're wearing a dress.
Typical. I roll my eyes. How observant of you.
You're wearing it for me?
Link bats his eyelashes, then pulls me into him for a squeeze.
I knew you loved me.
It's not happening again, so enjoy it while it lasts. I tug the bottom of the corset down a little, trying to relieve some of the pressure against my breasts. I don't think Issa did it right.
That's how it's supposed to be, he says with a chuckle. Look at everyone else.
I glance around, admiring the women with their fresh tunics and billowing sleeves, embroidered dresses and vest cloaks. They all look festive and oddly comfortable.
Did Issa make the dress for you?
I nod, searching for her. My father asked her to. She put it together from her things. I'm much smaller than her. She made a point to tell me how difficult it was. I spot her standing with my father and Gil, her gaze sharp and assessing the crowd as she clutches a goblet like it's a lifeline. She looks as regal as usual in her crimson dress, and the jewels intricately wound in her hair sparkle in the firelight.
Well,
Link says, elbowing me back,
you better put it to good use.
His eyebrows waggle, and he nods toward the table closest to the wall, where Raph and Hector sit with a group of others. Eric and Wyatt hover at the far end of it, lost in a conversation of their own. I'm not sure if Link is looking at Raph or Hector, but whatever he's insinuating will never happen. When my eyes find Eric again, though, my stomach does a somersault. I shake my head despite the startling sensation. I'm not sure what you're implying, I grumble, but the answer is no. Clearing my throat, I shove his shoulder. Come on, you left your bride alone with Rory at your wedding. Poor Violet is still consumed in conversation. She needs rescuing. Link's eyes widen as if his new reality has just dawned on him.
Blimey, you're right. I'm someone's husband now.
He looks at me.
How did this happen?
I laugh and nod along. Don't let her hear you say that. Violet turns to us as we approach, and when her eyes meet mine, she looks me up and down again, uncertainty in her eyes. I don't want her to see me as the threat, not anymore. Congratulations, Violet, I say, and lean in to hug her. She's rigid at first, shocked even, then she wraps her arms around me. Thank you, she says, and I think she actually means it. I should be thanking you for helping Issa tend to me while I was recovering. As we pull apart, her eyes shift to Link. You'll take good care of him for me, I say. Violet snorts, exasperated. If he'll let me. Smiling, I bow my head in gratitude and take a step back. You look beautiful, by the way, I tell her, eyeing her gown with intricate lavender-colored embroidery on the sleeves and hem. I recognize it from Issa's many nights sewing by the fire. Enjoy your celebration. With a final appraisal of Link and his new bride, I head for Raph's table. A mug of mead and a fuzzy head sounds like a great way to end a long week. But as I walk over, I hear Eric's deeply rumbled anger as he rises to his feet. I pause, watching through the crowd as Raph stands too. He leans forward to brace himself on the other end of the table. Their daggered expressions lock on one another, and I groan inwardly. The gleam in Raph's eyes is hard to miss. And I hurry closer. Whatever's happened, he's amused, while Eric stands in coiled silence, trying to control himself. Hector rises next, and then Wyatt. And I know things are about to get out of control as I struggle to get closer. I stop on the outskirts as Wyatt mutters quietly to Eric, his eyes wide and beseeching as he talks him down. Not about me? You think I don't see what's going on? Raph says, and I can hear the slur in his voice. You pretend to hate her, but I am the king of lies. Raph boasts. I step closer, fearing what he might divulge in his drunken state, as Issa moves toward the commotion. Raph. What's this? Issa commands. Her gaze sweeps from Raph and Hector to Wyatt and Eric. Her voice is brittle and displeased, but from the way her eyes narrow on her son, I know this won't end well. All of you stop, Wyatt says, and Issa's inquisitive glare bores into her son. I clasp Eric's arm. Please, I beg him. My fingertips bite through his tunic. I can feel his muscles flex and tremble beneath my touch. Whatever he said, let it go. He's drunk. Don't ruin tonight for Link. Please, I beg, but I'm not sure if it's more for Link's or for Raph's benefit. Yeah, Raph adds, go back to your mead and... Shut up, Raph, I hiss, or I'll break your nose myself. He nearly stumbles back in feigned drunken surprise. He's not himself tonight. That much is obvious. He hasn't been himself all week. Or maybe I'm a fool, and this spiteful, drunken person is who Raph has been all along, only I'm just getting to see it. I look at Eric, the sober, more level-headed of the two, but I don't need to beg him or plead. Eric turns away from all of us and heads for the door. The crowd parts for him seamlessly, watching with curiosity. I flash Link and Violet an apologetic look, even if I have no control over so much testosterone. What was that all about? Issa repeats. It's not a question, but a demand for answers. Raph eyes Eric until the door latches behind him. He doesn't spare his mother a single look. Nothing. He snaps. His eyes find me, but dart away just as quickly, and he turns to Hector and Andrik. More drink, he demands, and they too stride away. Issa remains stoic despite Raph's dismissal, but while she watches her son retreat, it's the door Eric disappeared through that I can't tear my gaze away from. Chapter 33. Standing outside the longhouse, I push my sleeves up to my elbows and lift my face to the breeze. The tension and heat inside is suffocating, and I regret my entire ensemble. Can there not be a single day of normalcy in this place? When Wyatt returned from the beach, his eyes pinned on me and his head shaking as if he had no luck with Eric, I told myself it's not my responsibility nor my place to get involved in his feud with Raph. But the longer I stand here, the less I want to go back inside with the others. not with Raph in a foul mood and Issa on the prowl for answers, not with everyone else going about their merry ways while Eric stews down by the water, alone. Leaning my head back, I close my eyes and rifle through the onslaught of emotions and truths I've been steeped in for the past 2 days. The hurt and anger and confusion. Somehow it all seems pointless now. Pointless and exhausting. I haven't been able to shake this hum inside me. I talked to my father, and while we have a long way to go, our conversation soothed the rawest parts of me, and I've made my peace with Link. I should feel settled, and yet now I can't stop thinking about Eric and the reason for the strain between us, for his distance. I have the incessant desire to know more and understand. Before I can talk myself out of it, my feet are moving. The longhouse is behind me, and I'm leaving the village. I don't know exactly what I'm doing as I head toward the beach, to Eric, but I don't allow myself to overthink it. I'm too tired for that. Instead, I inhale the cool wind skimming off the waves. It staves off the disquiet I've felt all day, the nagging questions that loop through my mind, and the unfamiliar feelings I'm grappling with. I study the path with each step, ensuring my footing. I haven't stopped thinking about the look of longing on Eric's face in the woods yesterday, or the unfathomable regret that distorted his features, an ache in his voice as he stood in front of me, confessing the truth. The moon peeks through the clouds, washing Eric's form in a temporary halo where he sits in the sand on the beach. Born and raised and as connected to this place as I am, he still seems out of place. I wonder if that's how it will always be for him, the same as it is for me. Different, tainted, a lonely island. "What are you doing out here?" I ask, trudging closer through the sand. His boots are discarded beside him, and the surf kisses the tips of his toes. When Eric doesn't look back at me, I wonder if my question vanished on the breeze before he could hear me.
"I needed some air,"
he finally says, and I stop a few steps away. I can imagine. It got a little tense inside. I peer out at the roiling darkness. But a storm is coming. It would be smartest to stay indoors. He picks a piece of splintered driftwood from the sand.
"I'll take my chances with the storm,"
he mutters. I figured you'd say that. After a moment, Eric must realize I'm not leaving, and he peers up. His eyes rove over me as I struggle to pull off my boots, my dress fluttering in the wind. And finally, with a grunt, I lower myself to sit in the sand beside him.
"What are you doing?"
His confusion would be comical if the convoluted relationship between us wasn't so heartbreaking. "I can use some air too, unless," I say ruefully, gesturing between us, "you're still angry with me for punching you yesterday. I assume it's okay that I join you?" His gaze lingers on my hand.
"I deserved it."
With a sigh, I lift a shoulder. You know, it makes sense now why you've pushed all of us away from you, except Wyatt, of course.
"Is that so?"
I glance at him. You like to stew in your own misery. His eyes meet mine.
"And you don't?"
I huff a laugh. Yeah, I guess I do. I wrap my arms around my knees, pulling them into me, and my dress flutters in the breeze around my feet. My toes dig into the sand, grounding me as I force myself to ask the question that's been on my mind since I turned my back on him yesterday. Why tell me everything now? What's changed? Eric stares out at the churning sky. A pale patch of moonlight, barely sifting through the cloud cover, illuminates the imperfections on his face.
"You're different now."
He starts. Eric rubs his stubbled cheek against his shoulder, contemplating something.
"It's like you've lost your grit since your father's return. You don't walk around with a chip on your shoulder, determined to take on the world so much. Instead, you seem lost. It's affected me."
I barely hear the last part. I know Eric isn't heartless, so I'm not sure why I'm surprised to hear he has empathy for me, or that anything I do could affect him so much. I am lost, I admit. I've spent so long hating my father and convincing myself I'd never see him again. Now that everything is upside down, I can barely think straight. I don't know who I am. Not anymore. When I feel Eric's eyes on me, surprise and humility bloom across my face. I don't know why I just told you that, I murmur. Eric smiles to himself ever so slightly.
I know who you are,
he says quietly and draws absently in the sand.
You're the girl who talks to her donkey as if he's an annoying little brother.
His cheek twitches.
And who laughs with abandon when she forgets how angry she is at the world. You think...
He tilts his head deep in thought.
You think everyone stares at you because of your scars, when instead they watch you with awe and curiosity, wondering how it could be possible that someone is so strong and determined.
I blink at him, and my stomach somersaults as an unfamiliar warmth spreads through me. Somehow, I feel naked. I'm not sure I've ever been speechless, but as my heart pounds against my corset, I feel more vulnerable and seen than I ever have in my life. Eric cares about me enough to notice such things.
Even strangers are drawn to you,
he finishes, bitterness in his voice again. Pursing my lips, I shake my head, my mind spinning a little. You mean Raph? It always comes back to him, and I hate that Eric's softness vanishes with the sheer thought of him. The wind picks up again, sending chills over my skin this time. The fishing boats tied to the pier thud against the pilings, and the clouds move and churn above. It's like we're two stones on the shoreline, the world shifting around us with the wind and waves. But as our silence stretches, I flatten my palms onto the sand. It's cool and calming against my skin. You and Raph will never get along, will you? It's a sad realization, because in a different existence, I think they could actually be friends. With a sigh, Eric drapes his elbows over his knees.
It doesn't matter. He'll be gone soon.
It matters to me, I say, surprising myself. It must surprise Eric too, because the waves are forgotten as he stares at me, the inkling of a scowl on his face.
You already know I don't trust him. Nothing will change that.
I shake my head in disbelief. Is that all it is? That he's a raider? Eric shrugs.
He's not right for you, Samara. He's overconfident and has weaseled his way into everyone's lives here, into your life. Take it from someone with their fair share of secrets. He's hiding something.
I'm not sure if Eric realizes it, but his hands clench the sand at his sides. It's only then I realize how good Raph is at pretending, how good he's always had to be. I haven't stopped to think what it might look like between Raph and me, to Eric, to Link, to Issa and everyone else. In fact, I hadn't thought it would matter. But it does to Eric. I study his profile, a stoic, sculpted god of condemnation, always so shadowed and hard to see through. I belong to no one, I whisper, and realize that perhaps the only person I've ever truly belonged to is my mother.
Anyone who knows you at all is well aware,
he says, and though I detect a hint of admiration in Eric's voice, that's not exactly what I meant. No, I sigh. Raph and I are only friends. A self-deprecating laugh escapes his throat.
I'm the last person you have to explain anything to, Samara,
he says.
It's not my business.
I guess it's not, but I feel the need to reassure him. What I mean is, the words wrestle for purchase on my tongue. You're more Raph's type than I am. Eric looks at me, his brow drawn in obvious confusion. With all the secrets Eric has kept over the years, I know that whatever inference he makes, he'll keep to himself. So, like I said, despite the long line of men from the village I have to beat away with my axe each day, there is no someone. Eric's eyes are unfocused as he stares at me, and I assume he's sorting every interaction he's had with Raph over the past 4 weeks, or the interactions he's seen me have with him, until finally, Eric's eyes shift to my scars. This time, there's consternation in his gaze, not hatred or disgust. I see the storm that's always been there, but it's darkened with an emotion far more terrifying this time.
But,
He finally says, shaking his head,
I've seen the way Raph is with you, how he makes you smile. I've never seen you smile around anyone but Link, and I know how close you and Link have been.
I try not to let it unnerve me that Eric knows about us, but he must see my discomfort.
I saw you coming up from the tide pools once,
He adds.
You weren't only holding hands.
I never thought Eric knowing anything about me would make a difference, let alone make me blush, but it does. You see a lot from that shack of yours, don't you?
More than I'd like,
He says gruffly, and stares back out at the swelling sea. Is that? I tilt my head, recalling the woods again. Was finding me and Raph together yesterday what set you off? I feel like I heal as little bits of the past weeks wink into place. You thought there was something more between us, and that bothered you? Eric watches the brewing tempest on the horizon. That he doesn't respond is all the answer I need, and once again, my cheeks burn so hot, I wonder if he can see it through the darkness. I tuck my hair behind my ear. I owe Eric no explanations, and I have done nothing wrong. And yet, seeing the changes in him, and knowing they are my fault in some way, makes me want to fix things. But what is there to fix? There's nothing between us. Is there? Frustration rising, I grip the sand, wanting him to speak plainly. Why? Why do you even care about Link or Raph, or anyone else for that matter? Though it's clear he has some form of feelings for me, I can't seem to comprehend how and why and when. Eric lifts his hand toward me, and I still, holding my breath. He runs the back of his finger from my cheek down to my chin, trailing the scars that have made his lip curl. His eyes narrow, and hate seep from his voice. My eyes begin to burn at such tenderness, and it angers me more. I grit my teeth. Eric?
There's nothing I can do to change what I've done. I know that.
His hand drops to the sand, but his gaze traces the contours of my face.
I don't expect your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But if you believe anything I've ever told you, Samara, believe this. Every horrible thing I've said over the years has only been said to make myself feel better. The loathing and anger was never about you. It was about me.
The quiet despondency in his voice brings tears to my eyes. But you were just a boy. Eric shakes his head.
And you weren't just a little girl. One who'd lost her mother because of me, and then her father too. God.
His voice thins, and he grimaces.
I've made you think you were some scarred monster.
I took care of that on my own.
But you're not, Samara. You're strong. You wear every battle wound like a badge of honor. You're beautiful.
No. I turn my face away from him.
Yes.
He grinds out.
You are. Has no one ever told you? Not Link, not...
Stop, I say, and brace myself to stand. But Eric's fingers wrap around my wrist. Let go of me. I bite out, glaring at him. I'm not sure why his words cut so deeply, but it feels as if a blade gouges my heart, and I can't bear to hear whatever he'll say next.
Maybe,
Eric starts, barely above a whisper. He stares at his fingers clasped around my wrist, where his thumb strokes my pulse, soft and slow.
Maybe I've convinced myself I've hated you because if I don't...
His eyes flick to mine.
If I don't, I'll have to live with the truth that I can never have you.
He says roughly.
That I don't deserve the one person I can't stop myself from wanting most.
I bury my toes in the sand, desperate to disappear. Why are you saying these things? I ask hoarsely because my throat burns and my chin trembles. There's a chirp of warning in my mind, telling me that this is Eric. He can be cruel and I should not want him. That I should never forgive him or trust him or yearn for him to see me the way I'm beginning to see him.
I'm saying them because
his gaze enlivens with an urgent determination.
I'm not good at this, Samara, but for once, I want to speak what's true.
I stare into his eyes. I have felt his anger and hateful words. I have squirmed in his brooding silence and thought he was the last person in the world I could ever think well of. But I have seen his compassion too, and my heart flutters at his candor. It soothes the broken parts of me, even if I don't fully understand it. Eric, I don't... His mouth is on mine before I can finish, and heat fills my veins. It whirs and floods through me, overwhelming my senses. His lips, they are warm, but his kiss feels like a self-inflicted punishment he can't seem to resist. Not soft or caring, but desperate. His palm cups my jaw, and I clutch his wrist, uncertain if I want to pull his hand away or kiss him back harder. But I lose myself to intoxication instead. He smells of rosemary and leather, and tastes sweet like honey mead, mixed with the salt of the sea. After a breathless moment, Eric pulls away. I gasp as his hand falls from my face, the warmth of him evaporating on the wind. Eyes still closed, he shifts his head ever so slightly.
He
exhales and finally opens his eyes.
I'm sorry.
For the past, or for kissing me? My tongue won't work to ask, so we sit as we are, my leg bent, resting on his thigh, both of us catching our breath. I stare at his mouth, my lips tingling from his scruff, and I revel in the sensation. Eric looks anywhere but at me.
I won't do that again.
I didn't hate it, I admit. My mind is reeling a little, but I didn't hate it. Again, Eric's focus drifts to me, and it's as if his layers, everything I've peeled away in the past weeks, are all there and so painfully obvious. I can't believe I never saw the real him until now, that I never even cared to try. I'm not sure if you've noticed, I say, looking out at the churning waves, but I'm not good at any of this either. You say I've changed since my father returned, and you're right. A month ago, I would have thought I'd lost my mind saying this, but I wish we hadn't wasted so much time, that we could have been friends. I dig my toes deeper into the sand. I think we both could have used another one.
Friends,
Eric mutters, more to himself as he exhales, long and deep. I watch the way he starts to retreat into his thoughts. I can practically see the walls building up around him again. What? You don't want to be friends? He blinks out at the horizon.
Yes,
he says into the wind.
I want to be friends.
His reticence says otherwise. It doesn't sound like it, I tell him, and now that I know how much he holds back, I need to know what he isn't saying, even if I can feel it charging the air between us. Say it, whatever it is. Eric doesn't look at me as he rubs his jaw in contemplation.
The
sky opens up, the impending storm letting loose, and the rain falls. Both Eric and I peer up at it. Large drops splash against my face and trickle down my cheeks. This seems fitting, I mutter. I absorb the purity of it for a few heartbeats, the rain washing away the tension in my shoulders and cooling the heat tingling my skin. Lightning strikes one of the rods along the village wall behind us, and Eric takes my hand, pulling me to my feet. Grabbing our boots, we run away from the water and through the sand. I think we're running for the cliff path when we duck inside the pelt storage instead. We both heave inside the doorway, watching the storm worsen as another flash of lightning brightens the sky. Water drips down my face, my chest heaves, my dress clings to my legs. It's only as I register the heat of Eric's arm brushing mine that I meet his gaze, and the undeniable truth of this moment settles in. I want to be far more than his friend. Chapter 34. All of my life, I've walked by the pelt storage, noticing the stacks of cleaned furs and hides for trading, but never have I been inside with Eric. Never have I realized he's large enough he could touch the exposed rafters if he wanted to, or that his mere presence fills the room the way it does. He's a man with intent focus, whose body is honed from hard labor, and he's so beautifully broken. I can't bring myself to look away as the light flashes across his face. The moment his attention shifts to my heaving chest, and I see in his eyes what I feel inside, all uncertainty is forgotten. An indescribable need takes over, and any discomfort under the weight of his stare smolders to ash, anticipation and a primal desire fanning a new, all-consuming flame. I shove him against the wall, devouring the space between us, and my mouth is on his, hungry and demanding reciprocation. Eric grips my hips, but instead of pulling me closer, he holds me farther away, keeping us apart. His fingers press into my flesh as he lets out a ragged breath.
"What?"
He swallows.
"What are you doing?"
The words are clipped and hard, but not with scorn. They are barely restrained, and there's a gleam in his eyes, too bright in the flashing light for me to mistake it for anything else this time. "Taking what I want," I whisper. There's a hitch of a moment, a space between breaths, when Eric's shock transforms into something dangerous. He grips my jaw, lifting my face to fully meet his gaze. There's no more resentment and hostility, only need, and he tugs me against him. Our hips collide, and his hot mouth covers mine as one hand knots in my hair, his other sliding down my back, covering the swell of my backside as he presses me closer. He grips my thigh and lifts me up, spinning us around so my back is against the wall. The wood is unyielding and snags against my dress sleeves, but I wrap my legs around his middle, too eager to care.
"This can't be real."
He breathes against my neck, nipping at the flesh beneath my jaw. It better be. I rake my fingers through the soft bristle of his hair and lift Eric's face to mine, pulling his bottom lip between my teeth. I've never felt so consumed with need, so hot with desire, I can't keep still. My nights with Link were a sweltering, sweet embrace, our time together only a bandage protecting open wounds. But Eric, I gasp as he rips my corset open, the buckles and leather creaking in protest. The cool air accosts my exposed breasts as I tug my loose dress sleeves off my shoulders. But Eric chases the chill away with his fire-hot tongue. Moaning, my head falls back. His teeth graze my collarbone. His lips brush gently over the healing wound on my neck. His fingers press into my hips with the pressure of 1,000 curses.
"Samara,"
he growls against my skin.
"Stop me now, or I swear."
Shaking my head, I reach between us, fumbling with the buckle of his pants. With a flash of challenge in his eyes, Eric makes quick work with one hand, drops his pants, and presses me harder into the wall. "We have to be careful," I rasp. Eric nods, and everything is pleasure, pain, and slick skin, new feelings colliding with the old, and a thirst so ravenous I think it might never be sated. With a growl of ecstasy, he leans his forehead against my shoulder, scores my flesh with his teeth, and consumes me, our ragged breaths swallowed by the raging storm. Chapter 35. I stir to a loud crack of thunder, and Eric tracing a feather-light trail over my shoulder. Despite him taking me against the wall, and again on the bed of rabbit pelts, it's only now, as his rough fingertips caress my skin, that butterflies erupt inside me, and an uncontainable smile tickles my lips. His warmth behind me, his strength, is unlike any I've ever felt, protective and all-consuming. I crave it like I crave the sunshine after weeks hidden behind the clouds. And in his comfort, my eyes flit shut, and I feel my mind drift off to sleep once more. When I stir again, the rain drones on, and the waves crash on the beach. I open my eyes to lightning flashing in the sky, but Eric sleeps, washed in the flickering shadows of the storm. I stare at the rise and fall of his bare chest, admiring the imperfections of his body, the crooked bridge of his nose, the pinky-length scar shimmering on his right pec, and a few small others on his bicep folded behind his head. Battle wounds, perhaps, from when he was young. Maybe a few of them are even from me. And I have a suspended moment of disbelief. I'm lying with Eric, my sworn enemy, though I can barely remember why. The history between us seems to have fizzled to nothing, and whatever this is now feels right. Something pleasantly ferocious and warm stirs in me when I look at him, a contentment I've never known and want so badly. I fear closing my eyes will take it all away. More flashes of lightning fill the room, but thunder never comes. The storm is moving on, and I feel a pang of disappointment, knowing this night will soon be over. I nestle deeper into the furs and study the hard lines of Eric's face, smoothed by sleep, the russet stubble covering his jaw and the soft fan of his lashes, remembering the gentle brush of his fingers when he thought I was asleep. I know that beneath his hard edges and grit, Eric's just a man, a broken but strong and beautiful one, and I never thought he could look so peaceful or so perfect. My eyes droop once more, and with another flash of lightning, I nestle closer, inhaling the scent of his skin, knowing it tastes like a warm day at sea, and despite myself, I fall asleep against him. Seabirds and ocean waves are louder than usual when I wake again. The night rushes back to me, and I remember I'm in the pelt storage on the beach. There is no heavy rain or sweeping wind, and the dusky gray morning filters in through the cracks in the wall. Rubbing my eyes, I sit up, my side hitching, and I wince. Furs fall from my naked body, but I think nothing of it, because I'm alone. In the garish light of day, last night leaves me with uncertainty. Sleeping with Eric was impulsive, which generally leads to regret, and only now do I consider last night was something that will never be spoken of or acknowledged. But even as I stew alone in my uncertainty, I can't help but cherish our night, because whatever Eric and I shared gave me momentary peace. Flinging off the furs, I peer around for my clothes, discarded somewhere on the ground. Panic sets in when I don't see them. Then my eyes lock on the stool tucked in the corner. My dress and corset are folded on it, my boots sitting on the ground beneath it.
Someone who makes you long to crawl into bed each night, who folds your trousers and leaves them on the trunk, knowing you can never find them when you're half asleep in the morning.
I bite my bottom lip, but eventually a smile prevails. My mind wanders to Eric as I dress. When did he leave, and where did he go? Why did he let me sleep instead of waking me? What happens next time I see him? Once I'm dressed, have run my fingers through my hair to tame it, and have assembled my attire to the best of my ability, broken corset, buckle, and all, I close up the pelt storage behind me and head for the village. The air is misty and cool as I glance around to see if anyone is on the beach or at the pier, but it must be early still, and since the storm only recently passed, the day hasn't started yet. Still, I'm sure my father or Raph have noticed I'm not in my loft. I hurry up the path, about to walk through the gates of the village, when my father steps out, Gil at his side.
"There you are,"
my father says. Though I've done nothing wrong, it's still strange to stand in front of both father figures, remembering Eric's mouth on my body last night. And while Gil eyes me far too closely with a glint of curiosity, my father seems oblivious. "Yes, I say, clearing my throat. "Here I am."
"Come,"
my father says.
"I'd like to show you both something."
He nods toward the ship. Reality hits me with a gust of wind as I stare at La Condesa undulating in the swells in the cove. After all the years we spent praying she wouldn't visit our shores again, I never would have thought I'd step foot on her willingly, that I would do so brimming with curiosity instead of fear. Chapter 36. I've been on fishing boats. I've explored the old wrecks that clutter the coast in both directions, but never have I been on a raider ship before. Never have I seen one so close or been swallowed by its shadow. And despite the knowledge it is my father's men aboard the ship, tension thickens in the sinewy tendons of my shoulders as the rowboat bumps the boarding ladder. Even the waves seem more foreboding, lapping against the bow. But as my father stands, offering me his hand, I take it. Raindrops sprinkle my cheeks as I scale the side of the ship, noticing a pulley swinging in the breeze above, and feeling every sway and clack of the ladder as I ascend. A raider peers down at us from the deck. I've seen him before, bald with lighter skin, and indiscernible tattoos covering what I can see of his arms and neck. He offers me his hand, hoisting me onto the deck. Hard ground. It feels strangely right as it moves with the ship. Thick ropes the size of my arm tie off cannons on wheels that line both sides of the deck. Counting them, I swallow thickly. 10. 10 cannons, 5 facing the walls of our village. It would have been so easy for Gutierrez to fire upon us years ago instead of raiding us. And a sickening sort of gratitude consumes me, knowing his curiosity of what hid behind our walls is all that likely saved us. The wind picks up, a violent gust that howls over the ship, and I brace my hand against the mast to steady myself.
Ibrahim.
A raspy male voice meets my ears. I glance over as a few men lower barrels into an opening near the stern. The raider speaks to my father in Spanish, though my father answers in English. I watch their exchange, surprised that my father understands him, but I'm not sure why at this point.
Tomorrow,
my father says, and the man dips his head. When he notices me watching, he nods toward the barrels.
Water for the journey home.
It seems odd that they would prepare to leave already, but I don't pretend to understand life at sea. And ignoring the rain, I examine more of the ship. When the toe of my boot hits a lip in the wood, I peer down through a trellised covering. Hammocks sway in and out of view. Imagining Raph or my father sleeping in one is easy enough. But Issa? I can't picture it without a smirk, and I understand why she wanted to live on dry land during her temporary stay here. I take a step back as creaking and grumbling meets my ears from above. 2 men are halfway down the mast, metals and ropes and coiled wires hanging off of them. What are they doing up there? I ask, no one in particular.
Fitting the ship for storms.
My eyes snap to my father's. You aren't waiting for the season to pass? There was a time when my father would have forbidden me from even considering such a thing. Isn't that dangerous?
We're preparing the ship as best we can,
he says.
We are putting in rods and grounding wire, whatever we can manage.
I'm not sure where my father's sudden urgency to return home comes from. I look at Gil, waiting for him to protest, but he's watching the men chat in Spanish as they descend.
Come,
my father says, walking toward a raised deck above the stern.
I want to show you something.
Gil and I fall into step behind him as I assess the rest of the ship. Some of the balusters have markings carved into them. Tallies, as if days had been counted, or the number of men killed. Given the dark stains on the sun-bleached wood beneath my feet, I balk at the thought.
This,
my father says, pointing to a door with a dirty window pane,
is the chart room. It's where I found maps of all the village locations that Gutierrez raided over the years, and ledgers of what he took from them, slaves included.
My eyes meet my father's, and while I feel a flash of anger and horror, my father seems resolved.
One of many reasons you decided to hunt the other raider ships down,
Gil concludes aloud. My father looks at him, but says nothing. Slaves. Murdered innocents. Sadness fills my heart as I realize once more how lucky our village has been over the years. None of us have ever been taken as slaves or pets. And that I should be grateful to have survived so much heartbreak, havoc, and death sickens me. My father opens a door to a large cabin, stepping aside so Gil and I can come in out of the rain. Unlike the marred, weathered wood outside, the cabin is furnished with rich furniture and washed in a rainbow of colors, streaming in from the stained glass floor-to-ceiling windows. A desk with ledgers, rolled maps, and candles is situated in front of it, but it's the round table off to the side my father motions to. I pry my gaze from the bookshelves lining one wall and the plush bed adorned with bright fabrics tucked in the corner of the other.
This,
my father starts,
is a map of the land around Oaxaca.
Attention piqued, I stop beside him, peering down at the well-worn diagram of the southern part of the continent.
When I arrived at port, I hadn't expected the city to be as close as it was. A fishing village like ours, maybe, but not the city itself. It's only then I learned about the volcanoes in the eastern part of the country, that the people of the land have been forced farther west over the years. The Gutierrez family rebuilt the city closer to sea access decades ago, but in doing so, they focused so much on what they could take from everyone else, they didn't think about what they had all around them.
Which is, Gil says, eyeing the map more closely,
lava stone.
We both look at him.
They have been stuck in the same mindset for centuries. Jewels and mining from the south, and food from the north, where the land is easier to cultivate. But the volcanic rock that covers more than half of the country is just as valuable, if not more so.
Then food? I shake my head. How can that be?
It does everything,
he says simply.
Andrik and I were exploring the land around the city not long after we arrived in Oaxaca. Only 2 days into our journey, we both fell ill, likely from the water we brought with us to drink. We didn't think we'd make it, that the dysentery would take us after all we'd been through, and we were resigned to our fate.
I try to imagine my father in a foreign land, surrounded by a tropical forest, with spotted, prowling cats and swarms of mosquitoes after the rain. It would seem a cruel joke, succumbing to sickness after he'd survived so much bloodshed.
But an old man found us in the jungle, and his family took us in. They were different than the rest of the people we'd met in the city. They were small and darker skinned. Even their language was different. They were from the old civilization, and we'd stumbled upon an entire community of them living around the lava beds. It made no sense to us at first, but Andrik's theory proved right in the end.
Which was what? I prompt.
The lava stone itself.
My father lifts a large porous rock from off the table and hands it to me.
It has different forms throughout the mountains, and while the Gutierrez family has always seen it as a desolate place, these people thrive there. They cook on this rock and build with it. It filters their water and is rich with minerals for cultivating the soil, and...
He picks up a chunk of shiny black obsidian and hands it to Gil.
There is no shortage of this. We can trade it for salt from the beds in Baja, or for weapons and tools.
As my father's voice echoes with possibility, I realize why he's showing us this. Like our ancestors mined for gold and copper, you would mine for the lava stone. He runs his fingers through his beard, tugging absently on the ends.
I would do much more than that, Samara. I would have us establish a trade route. I would have our legacy be one of commerce and shared community. I would unite those of us whose meager existence is to simply survive in the wake of the shift.
He looks between Gil and me.
I would move toward a world where we aren't fighting to survive, but thriving together, rebuilding this world with what the land has provided us. There would be no reason to raid and steal. Not anymore.
The rain outside plinks against the window.
You would start a new industry,
Gil thinks aloud.
And in doing so, we would leave a future for our children.
My father replies.
Something to be proud of, and for them to expand.
And when my father's gaze rests on me, I understand this is the empire he wants me to claim, not what he took from Gutierrez, but something far more revolutionary. I walk over to the stained glass window, peering at the ocean that stretches beyond us. as far as the eye can see. The white caps break against the rocky shoreline in the distance, and the green cliffs stretch into the gray clouds of rainfall. Until a month ago, I'd accepted I was an orphan, that I would spend my days working as hard as I could for the village, protecting them, and caring for Gil in his old age, while Link started a new family. Now, in the weeks that have passed, I've not only inherited a new family and found solace in the arms of the most unexpected friend, but an existence I can barely comprehend dangles in front of me. A possible empire, a reformation. You are showing me this, so I will leave with you, I say.
So that you know what you turn away from if you decide to stay.
He explains. Arms crossed over my chest, I glance over my shoulder at him.
I know you're reluctant to leave, Samara, and I understand why. But you should know what you would be turning your back on as well. What I build, what we could build, will not only provide protection and alliances with other cities, but provide for our people. And a thriving people is a loyal people, and there is power in that. There is safety.
I stare at the undulating horizon, awash with indecision. What if I do decide to stay?
Then,
he drawls,
that is your decision. But I will do this, especially knowing what Andrik and I can accomplish. And Gil, if you still want to join us, I believe prosperity and peace among all villages in the West will be possible one day. We just have to work for it.
My father's words are hopeful, and I hear the passion in his voice, the sheer determination that what he envisions will eventually be a reality. But the world beyond the cliffs terrifies me more than I ever thought possible, now that it's within reach. And where my father sees possibility, I see danger in what he's uncovered. I can feel it. Chapter 37. When we finally row back to shore, the rain has stopped and the clouds glow as it nears sundown.
We'll speak with everyone tonight,
my father says as he rows toward the dock. He struggles against the waves only slightly.
But the trade route stays between us, for now. I want the first wave that joins us to do so for the right reasons, not for the hope of wealth or power. We do need a head count, though, and soon. There are many preparations to make for the journey back.
My father slows the boat with the oars as we glide toward the pier. Why the sudden urgency? I give voice to the question that's been lingering since I saw the water barrels and metal fittings. Why not wait out the storm season to ensure it's safe, especially if you might have our people sailing with you? My father's expression is grave and hesitant.
If there's one thing I've learned over the years, it's to anticipate the unexpected. After those men attacked you in the woods, Samara, I want to be prepared to leave, if we have to.
Gil and I exchange a quick glance. I'm not sure I like the idea of my father leaving us when he's likely the reason strange men have come to begin with, and I wonder if Gil feels the same. Regardless, he nods to my father in agreement.
We'll start serious conversations about it tonight,
he promises. Either way, all of this, pirate ships and sailing away to faraway lands, is really happening. In the near future, will Ebonpeak be an abandoned village? If everyone did decide to go with him, would we leave in waves? Surely people would have to pack, and there is livestock to consider. My mind spins a little as I consider how huge this is. I notice Raph walking toward us as my father ties our boat to the pier. Dark circles shadow his eyes, and he looks almost sick, as if he never even slept last night in all his drunkenness.
I need to speak with you, Abraham,
he says quietly, and when Raph notices me, he straightens. My father assesses him with as much scrutiny as I do, and with a brusque nod, my father climbs from the boat and follows Raph back toward the village. Gil and I exchange another look and climb out behind him, hanging back since it's obviously a private conversation. I stare at Raph's back as we make our way off the pier. I'm worried about him, but as he and my father stalk farther and farther away, I'm distracted by the tide pools. After my whirlwind with Eric last night and a day of overthinking the future, the water beckons me. Instead of heading up the path to the village, I walk down the beach. My steps are languid, and I inhale the breeze, appreciating the sand between my toes. Anticipating the cool waves, I loosen my corset and consider the possible future that awaits me, should I leave Ebonpeak. It will be different from all that I know, which is both enticing and terrifying. I will regret not leaving with my father and Gil. I know that much. Because Gil will go. I know that too. Life here grows harder for him every year. I see it in the ache of his bones and the worried crease of his brow. Link might go, if Violet would go with them. But it's what Eric will do that I consider. Whatever we are now, even if it's nothing but a torrid night never to come again, I don't want to think it ends like this. A lifetime of animosity, a night of pleasure, and a future apart. As I round the rocky cove, it's as if the waves conjure him from beneath the sea, and I stop short. Eric emerges from the water, rivulets cascade down his muscle-hewn back, and my heart flutters. I can't suppress an appreciative grin as my gaze trails the cut of his waist, settling on the swell of his backside that barely peeks from the water's surface. Running his hands over his head, Eric turns toward the beach. He barely takes a step before noticing me, and freezes. His expression gives nothing away. Not surprise or excitement to see me, not even a perturbed displeasure that I've intruded on his reverie. His hands fist at his side, a telltale sign he's trying to control himself, and my eyebrow lifts of its own accord. A couple more steps, I tell him, and lean against the rock, arms crossed over my chest. I glance at the water swishing around his hips. I just barely see the amusement flicker across his face before it's gone again, and I groan inwardly. He's far too good at hiding his feelings, I realize, except when he's in the throes of passion, that is. And now, as he looks at me, a sudden need to make his stone facade shatter all over again fills me. Eric walks out of the water, unaffected by my words, and grabs his trousers, discarded on the rock closest to him. If he feels any vulnerability or apprehension around me after last night, he doesn't show it in the slightest. So, unabashed, I appreciate every inch of his body as he tugs his pants on. I'm sorry to intrude, I lie as he walks over to me. The sand molds to his bare feet, and water drips from his nose.
Are you?
Eric stops a foot from me, his gaze roving over me. His voice is smooth like honey, and my insides melt. No, I admit with a shrug. Not at all, actually. His eyes smile and linger on my lips as the air between us hums. It seems we both had the same idea, I say, my heart thrumming in his proximity.
I had a long night. I needed to cool down.
That he can say such things with a straight face only makes my blood pulse hotter and my heart beat faster. Yeah, that storm was intense. Eric nods with the hint of a smile, his eyes fixed on my mouth. How is it he can stand there so calmly when everything inside me feels like a spark itching to catch flame? He exudes nothing but raw male power, and it's all I can do to keep my wits about me. I clear my throat. You were gone when I woke up. There's an ache in my voice I hadn't expected. Eric runs his hand over his head and down his face, breaking our connection.
I had to collect my father from the alehouse.
Regret, embarrassment, exhaustion. His words are laced with it and all the responsibility he bears in his father's absence.
I didn't want to, though.
He promises, stepping closer. Eric reaches for my chin. His thumb gently brushes my bottom lip as his eyes scour mine, seeking permission before he leans in and tilts my mouth to his. My palms settle on his shoulders, his skin searing beneath my fingertips as I encourage him closer. His kiss is slow and exploratory at first, sending chills over my skin, but it builds to something more passionate with each of our heartbeats. Eric pulls away with a ragged breath and rests his forehead against mine.
What you do to me,
he rasps, and slowly he shakes his head in disbelief.
You have no idea.
I think I might, I whisper over the sounds of the sea, and my finger trails over his chest and down to his belly button, hooking on the waistband of his pants. He squeezes his eyes shut.
Whatever this is between us,
he starts, but when he lifts his head, I see fear in his gaze, not desire.
I know I don't deserve more from you. If this is all we have.
I press my finger to his lips, the crack in his voice tearing at my soul. Don't, I tell him. I can't bear to waste any more time. Please, the past doesn't matter here, not when it's the future that looms ahead, not when right now, in this moment, I am the happiest I've ever been, when everything feels extraordinary and right. The words sound silly, but Eric's eyes shimmer in the burnt orange of sunset, and as they fill with relief, hope swallows all the dark insecurities. Lifting on my tiptoes, I press my lips to his again, a tender, reassuring kiss that promises whatever this is between us is special and ours alone. And when I pull away, I take a step back. As pleasant a surprise as it was to find a naked man down here, I say, I did come with a purpose, so... Lifting the skirt of my dress, I crouch down and unbuckle my boots. My corset comes next, and Eric's gaze wanders my skin as my dress falls from my shoulders. I step out of it, instantly sobered by the concern that etches his face. What? He stares at my side, his expression hardened like the old Eric, as he brushes his fingertips gently over my marred skin.
Did I hurt you last night?
Oh. The knife wound is tender, but healing. No, not that I would have noticed, though. I tease, but he doesn't smile or look the slightest bit relieved. I'm healing, I promise. That doesn't seem to register either. Eric's gaze is fuzzy and far away, shadows clouding his eyes again.
When I saw you covered in blood,
he whispers. His voice is laced with anguish.
I thought it was too late.
I take his hand in mine, calloused and scabbed, like so much of our lives have been, and interlace our fingers. Too late for what? Finally, his eyes meet mine. The pain I saw in them that day on the cliff returned.
For everything.
His thumb moves absently across the back of my hand.
Too late to tell you the truth, to tell you how sorry I am and how I feel.
His words hurt because we've lost so much time and wasted so much energy over the years. They're a blur of what-ifs, so I cling to a single thought. How do you feel about me? Each word is careful and measured, and I realize I'm holding my breath. A storm passes behind Eric's eyes, and his brow furrows. There's attraction and passion, yes, but those are fleeting. And yet, as greedy as I am to hear the answer, I'm terrified too. I think I'm as terrified as he is to speak it. I move his hand to my side and splay his fingers over the wound. I'm okay, I whisper, and you did tell me the truth, and maybe that's enough for now. I mean every word, because whatever his feelings, I know they are real, that they mean something to him. For the first time, his silence is all I need to hear, and I nod to the receding waves. Swim with me? I ask, not wanting to part from him yet. I don't wait for a reply as I make my way to the water, my hair tickling the middle of my back. I hear his pants drop in a soggy heap, but the sound of waves drowns out the rest. The tepid water laps at my feet, and the soft sand under my toes beckons me in. I welcome the goosebumps that rake over me as I dive under, submerging myself in the sea. My heartbeat is slow and steady in my ears. Water streams between my toes and fingers. Bubbles tickle my skin, and the waves pull at my loose hair and undulate over my sore muscles as everything falls away, and I relish my weightlessness. When I finally breach the surface, the waves glisten and roll on the horizon, and I bask in the dusky glow of evening. Eric breaks the surface of the water beside me. Is there anything better than this? I ask in all seriousness, feeling weightless and alive at the same time. He reaches out and brushes a strand of hair from my face before answering.
No, I don't think there is.
He's so pensive and thoughtful, I can't help but grin. You know what I've realized? His eyes meet mine, water drops hanging from his lashes.
What's that?
I don't really know you. Not anymore. I mean, I know what I see, but I, of all people, know that is not the same as what you are. My words are a bit breathless as we tread water, moving with the swell of the waves. You work constantly, take care of your father. You hunt and fish, but I don't know anything else.
What else is there to know?
He asks. I splash him with a small laugh. Everything. That earns me a slight tug of a smile on his lips, and leisurely we swim back toward the shore. Eric faces me as he swims backward.
What do you want to know?
Well, for starters, have you ever laughed? He barely refrains from rolling his eyes as his mouth lifts in a schooled smile, but I crave to see more of it. Don't. I hold out my finger. Don't you dare smile. It will ruin your allure. The mystery of the strong and silent tanner son, renowned hard-ass and... I can't finish because Eric's cheeks blush, and this time I practically swoon as he flashes me a genuine, heart-stopping grin and splashes me.
Stop it.
Why? It's true. I goad him, splashing him back.
No, it's not.
Yes, just ask Amelia. I saw the way she looked at you in the alehouse. She's clearly fallen for your brooding ways. His brow twitches with confusion.
What?
Oh, please. When I splash him again, he grips my wrist and pulls me closer until our naked bodies press together. I lick the salt from my lips, inhale a sharp breath, and my heart drums against my chest. I'm not sure how it's possible this feels so natural, but I wrap my arms around his neck, clinging to him as his feet touch the sandy bottom. Eric holds me against him, and when I press my lips to his, our tongues grazing, a hum escapes from deep inside him. It's another slow, exploratory kiss that has my legs tightening around him. His fingers glide down my back, knotting in the ends of my hair before he gently tugs, exposing my neck as his lips brush the tender flesh by my wound. Another beauty mark to add to the collection, I murmur, and I groan when he presses a kiss to the hollow of my neck.
You joke,
he whispers in my ear.
But you have no idea how achingly beautiful you are, how strong. You see muscle and brawn when you look at me,
he says huskily.
But I have never fought for something with my whole heart the way you have, for your father and your independence in this village.
Even with my eyes closed in utter contentment, his words stir something inside me, and emotion burns the backs of my eyes, forcing them open. Lifting my head, I stare at him, needing to see in Eric's eyes what I hear in his voice, something heartfelt and honest.
And I have not killed 3 men with my axe to protect myself.
I scoff, only because you weren't there to do so. He shakes his head. Eric, you work harder than any of us and put yourself last in all things. You care for people who can't care for themselves. And that day under the cart in the storm, and when I came through that gate barely able to stand, you aided me when I've needed you most. So do not tell me you are not as strong or as good or as important as me or anyone else. You are a man of worth, and I can't believe I have not seen it until now. I kiss him, desperate for him to know what I feel for him, utterly and completely. I don't know when Eric lays me down on the sand with the water lapping at our feet, or when our kisses become reverent and intoxicating. I don't know for how long he worships my body before I can't stand not to touch his, and we lose ourselves to silent reassurances and adoration under the full moon rising over the sea. Chapter 38. It's evening by the time we force ourselves to head back to the village. It's the last thing I want to do, but disappearing 2 nights in a row won't go unnoticed. I watch Eric as we make our way up the path to the gates. He's quiet and thoughtful as always, his clothes sandy, clinging to his damp body. I'm sure I look like a wildling, with mussed hair and dirty clothes too, but I can't bring myself to care in the slightest. I take Eric's hand in mine, emboldened after all we've shared. He stares at our entangled fingers, a smile quirking the corner of his lips, and squeezes. When his eyes meet mine, I see relief and something new, a soft serenity I have never seen in them before. Whatever Eric couldn't bring himself to say earlier, I felt instead. He showed me with every kiss and touch, every whispered endearment. Eric, man of few words, shared his soul with me. I lift an eyebrow. I can't carry you home like you've done for me, but how about I walk you to your door to return the favor? His lips twitch with another hint of a smile.
Only if you don't mind my father getting out of line if he sees you, because he'll be drunk, and it's bound to happen.
I nudge his shoulder. Your dad is harmless. I don't care what he says. I know he doesn't mean anything by it. It's more nostalgia that haunts him than anything. And with that, I sober. About fathers, actually. I tug Eric to a stop. Have you given any thought to leaving with mine? He watches me, his eyes narrowing on me as I bite my cheek.
What do you want me to do?
He asks. I glower, though I'm not sure he can tell in the night shadows. Me? No, I don't want to be responsible for your decision.
But you want me to be responsible for yours?
He counters.
That's why you're asking me, isn't it?
I purse my lips, hating that he's right, and I know it's foolish to base my decision on what Eric might do, given whatever is between us is so new. But I can't help feeling the weight of his decision keenly. He holds my gaze. Fine, I wave the question away. You're right, I don't know what I want to do yet. I lead Eric through the gate, but he pulls me to a halt as we step into a horde of people filing into the longhouse. I'd forgotten about the meeting. Eric! Wyatt calls as he hurries down the path. His red locks flop around as he jogs over, leaving his grandfather to enter the longhouse with the others.
What's going on?
Eric asks. His voice is sharp with apprehension. I glance between them. My father and Gil are speaking with everyone tonight. Wyatt surveys the crowd.
I haven't seen your father, but Gil is the one who asked Kenneth and me to gather everyone.
Realization dawns in Wyatt's eyes as he assesses my loose, damp hair and rumpled dress.
Where were you?
His stare is almost accusatory as it settles on Eric.
I went to tell you and your dad.
I can't help the heat that licks up my neck and through my cheeks.
Swimming,
Eric says.
Is my father here already?
With a sympathetic curve of his mouth, Wyatt shakes his head. I can imagine that means Rory is passed out drunk somewhere. Eric's eyes shift cagily to me, like he's hoping I'm not listening, before he nods for the 3 of us to head into the longhouse. But I know Rory all too well. I've known him my whole life, and now that I know the truth about what happened on Desolation Day, I realize Eric likely carries the weight of his father's never-ending grief for his dead wife, Eric's own mother he couldn't save, and that gnaws at me anew. Violet's parents don't register us as they brush past me and through the doors. I pull Eric to the side to listen in the back, and I stop short. Wyatt isn't following us. I glance over my shoulder. No, Wyatt isn't following us because he's staring at our joined hands, as if he can't quite process what he's seeing. When Eric notices, he offers Wyatt a tight-lipped smile and squeezes my hand. His thumb brushes my skin reassuringly, even if his gaze never leaves Wyatt. His friend's eyes widen with understanding.
Come on.
Eric nods for us to go in. Though Wyatt is clearly blindsided, he doesn't seem displeased, and I'm comforted by that. I'm not sure why, really, only that Wyatt and Eric are like brothers more than friends, and his acceptance matters to me. We stay toward the back as the last of the villagers trickle in. Only Gil stands where the council normally sits during meetings, and I peer around for the others. My father is supposed to be here, I whisper. Eric looks down at me, reading the concern on my face.
Then he'll come,
he tells me. It's not reassurance so much as a statement, and I allow it to chase away my nagging sense of unease, remembering Raph's drawn expression this afternoon.
Quiet, please,
Gil bellows.
I'll make this quick.
The rustling in footsteps and whispered questions come to an end, and my eyes are glued on Gil. I know him well enough to see he's concerned about something. The lines around his eyes seem more prominent, and he purses his lips. Link and Violet straggle in, Link's eyes meeting mine as he leads his new wife toward us. When he notices me standing with Eric, his eyes shift to our joined hands immediately, and then dart to my face. Like Wyatt, he studies me, but says nothing. I shrug as Gil clears his throat, and tearing his gaze from me, Link pulls Violet against him as I settle in to listen.
Debris washed up a few miles down the beach,
Gil says, and I straighten with dread.
While that's not exactly surprising, given the storms we've been having, there was a tattered red flag with an emblem we've never seen before, and if the snake is any indication, it's a ship from the south.
Gil nods to Andrek, standing with some of my father's men in the crowd.
I've been told it's the banner of a mercenary crew from Mexico City. You knew about this?
Eric whispers in my ear, but I'm already shaking my head. This isn't what they were going to address tonight. And that my father isn't here worries me even more.
After what happened in the orchard earlier this month,
Gil continues, his eyes settling on me,
it would be wise to prepare for the worst.
There's a cacophony of anxious muttering, and I look at Eric. His accusations that my attackers were my father's men are suddenly blaring. I'm glad that they weren't, but still, the truth isn't any more comforting. I take a step forward, and Brahm looks over his shoulder at me as I clear my throat. You think the men I met were mercenaries, then? I call over the crowd. Gil dips his chin.
We do. In fact, I think those men you stumbled upon were scouts, which leads me to wonder what the rest of them will do.
When they realize their scouts are dead, I whisper. My blood runs cold. It's been weeks, which means their crew knows by now. They have to. They've had time to watch us and plan their retaliation. Gil, I say breathily, and scan the fire-lit faces of the crowd. Where is my father? And Raph? Even Issa and Hector are absent from the gathering.
They took a group of men to look at the wreckage,
Andrek explains. Gil dips his chin.
We'll know more when they return. Until then,
Gil continues. His voice is calm and reassuring, but I have a sickening feeling I can't ignore.
We need to be vigilant. We've trained for moments like this all our lives. This is nothing new. And we need to prepare so, until another storm hits, we take up our normal posts. The watchtowers must be manned, and the perimeter should be checked for any repairs that need to be made. Weapons.
I tune him out as I remember this afternoon. That's what Raph needed my father for, I murmur. Eric looks down at me. He came to collect my father earlier, after we'd returned from the ship. The grave expression on his face makes more sense now. He was anxious. Gil continues addressing everyone and answering what questions he can, but by the time he's finished, my heightened awareness has me buzzing. There's something about this that unnerves me, and it's not that we might have a band of shipwrecked mercenaries plotting to kill us in our sleep. It's the timing of it all that makes my hands clammy and my pulse erratic. Did my father know about this? Is it why he's been readying the ship so soon? I can't connect it all, or see why he would lie, but it feels wrong all the same. My father's been telling me for weeks how dangerous it is here. I think aloud. I can feel Eric's and Link's eyes on me as my mind shuffles through the past month.
Why does it look like you're about to tell us more bad news?
Link says, I shake my head. I'm not. I mean, I don't know anything. It's just something doesn't feel right. Oh my gosh, we're going to be raided, aren't we? Violet whimpers. It's happening again. Shh. Link coos for reassurance as I stare at Eric. Am I foolish to think my father's been coaxing me to leave because he actually wants me to go with him? I ask him. Part of my brain laughs at me because my father would not attack his own people. But my father is also so different from the man he was before. I have to question how well I really know him. None of it makes sense, and yet all the pieces seem scattered at my feet, waiting to be fit together. But my father confided in me on the ship today, and I heard the hope and determination in his voice. I can't fathom him being a traitor either.
Hey,
Eric says, tugging my hand to bring me back to focus. My thoughts stir, and I look at him.
talk to me.
His eyes are full of warmth. I'm fine, I need to talk to Isa. His brow twitches with a frown.
About what?
I shake my head. I don't know, but I have a feeling she knows more than we do. I nod toward the door. You should go to your father, make sure he knows what's going on, make sure he's sober, and that he's ready. Eric's indecision is obvious, but I step away from him so he knows I'm decided. Go. I need to talk to Gil anyway. I need to know what he's not telling us. I look at Wyatt, and you need to make sure your grandfather is ready for this too, that he's safe from whatever comes next. Eric looks at Wyatt, and even if he's reluctant, he nods and meets my gaze again.
I'll come to you when I can.
Eric promises. With a wan smile, I nod and gesture to the door. Good luck. A lingering gaze hangs between us. It's weighted with unsaid words and reassurances. But finally, Eric and Wyatt disappear out the door. I hurry over to Gil, who's already chatting with Link, Violet, and her parents.
It's not as if we'll be blindsided, should it come to that,
Gil says. I let him play the calm, collected one as he offers everyone comfort and platitudes.
We've had so many intermittent storms,
Link adds, his eyes shift between Violet and her parents.
Mercenaries or not, they're not dumb enough to attack us when another storm could strike at any moment.
I sidle up to Gil and lean in. Where are Isa and Hector? I whisper. Gil's gaze shifts around the longhouse, as if he's only just realizing they didn't attend.
They could be at the cottage, waiting for Abraham.
And Raph? I add. Isa's stubborn, and she's likely waiting for her son to return. Gil nods. I'm going to head home then. I think Raph knew something when he came for my father, which means Isa likely does too. Even if it's in our blood to prepare for and assume the worst, Gil dips his chin, concern gleaming in his eyes.
Keep your wits about you,
he warns. I will. The bliss of my evening forgotten, I head out of the longhouse, into the balmy, breezy night. I'm not sure if the tingle on my skin is the onslaught of an incoming storm, or the buzz in the air from so much unease. I struggle with my stupid dress in my haste, swearing I will never wear another one in my life. I weave my way up the muddied road. Only an hour ago, it felt like nothing in the world could ruin a perfect evening with Eric at the tide pools. Now, it feels like it was only a dream. And as the cottage comes into view, the windows dark and empty, I'm not sure if I am more concerned or confused. Fergus must hear me approach because he brays in greeting as he steps out of his stall into his paddock. He brays again, but it sounds more like a chiding for not visiting him since yesterday, and I'm glad to see he's healed and back to his ornery self. Where is everyone? I ask him, my eyes locked on the cottage. I rub his head absently and continue to the house. I hadn't even thought that Isa and Hector might be with Raph and my father. I open the door, deciding it's best to change and get my axe before I find Eric. Familiar with every inch of the cottage, even in darkness, I step around the table to grab my axe on the weapons wall. Before I can reach for it, the floor protests under someone else's footsteps. A bludgeoning, forceful thwack sends fire lancing through my skull, and my legs give out on me as my vision blurs. Then, blackness. Chapter 39. I'm roused by a slamming door and heavy footsteps. As I try to lift my head and peel my eyes open, the fire in the hearth is nearly blinding. The back of my head throbs, and I lift my hand to it. Only my arms won't budge because my wrists are tied behind my back, smarting and squished between the chair I'm tied to and me. My sleepy haze is chased away by understanding and fear. What? Don't struggle, Issa says softly. If her voice weren't so detached, it would sound almost comforting. My eyes snap to where she stands at the mantel, staring into the flames. She taps a machete against her skirt. My confusion is fleeting, and in a single heartbeat, anger is a wild, fire-breathing dragon inside me, and a snarl escapes my throat. My father is behind this, I fume. Issa tilts her head, eyes smiling and a sneer parting her lips. No, stupid girl. Your father is not behind this, but he is an idealistic fool who would take everything from us, for you, daughter of his blood. She shakes her head, her lip practically curling in anger. Never mind Raph's loyalty to him, or mine. I open my mouth, tongue-tied by 1,000 questions, before I register someone at the window beside the door. Hector? He stands pensively, his hand on the pistol in his belt as he peers out the window. My focus sharpens on the shouts ringing in the distance, the faraway clank of metal hitting metal, and then gunfire. I shrink at the sound. We're being raided! A clawing need to free myself tears out of me in a shriek, and I fight against my bindings. Stop it, Samara. Ignoring Issa, I twist and turn. I wiggle and pull against the ropes burning my wrists. My side aches, my neck wound pulls, but I push the pain away, desperate to get free. I said enough! She shouts. Hatred solidifying, I grit my teeth and tug at the ropes for good measure. What have you done? I bite out. There are innocent people out there! And like the clouds suddenly blot the sun, my anger turns to ash. Us. I breathe, staring at Hector's outline. His gaze remains fixed out the window. Are you speaking in riddles again? Issa asks. I barely understood half of what you said in your fever sleep. Your father would take everything from us, I repeat, and I hate the dubious crack in my voice. I'd believed that Raph and I had become friends, that he'd confided in me, and I'd confided in him. It was all a lie. Issa's skirts rustle as she sets her machete on the mantel. The blade is not yet covered with blood, but I am not foolish enough to think she would never use it. Of course it was. Raph has as much to lose in this as I do, even if he seems to forget that at times. She mutters, shaking her head. She pins a glare on me. I didn't survive a tyrannical husband and help him build his empire, nurturing it while he was off raiding the coast, only for it to be taken from me, for your father to stand on my hard work so that he could make powerful alliances and gain favor with my people. She sounds incredulous and full of hate. I refuse to have sacrificed and bled nearly all that I have these past 20 years so that your father can give it all to you. But my father isn't a tyrant. He denies you nothing and offers Raph just as much as your father placates, she hisses, stepping closer. He is like all the rest of them. Don't let him fool you, Samara. He wants power as much as any man. He might not be a cold-blooded murderer, but he's not innocent. He's killed dozens of men, my husband. For what he has now, has he not? Expansion is all he thinks about, building off of my family, my sweat and tears. Your husband was a monster. He killed my mother. I bark back. My father is nothing like him. He spared you and your son. Issa rolls her eyes. We've all lost someone. Your father and you with your scarred-up face and broken heart. You're no different than the rest of us. She takes a step closer, her hair wispy around her face and slightly unkempt. making her look almost wild in the firelight. "Have you ever been torn from your mother's embrace and traded like you're no more than some cow in exchange for grain, Samara? My father didn't care how horrible my husband was when he sent me away. And you have never held a dying child in your arms. God didn't care what I wanted when he took my baby girl from me." It dawns on me that Isa took care of me after my attack, when she could have easily only pretended to do her best. "So you helped nurse me back to life? And what choice did I have?" she asks. "Everyone's eyes were on you." I shake my head. "That's not the only reason," I tell her. I refuse to believe that. She took care of me, her more than anyone. "Raphael asked me to keep you alive, so I did, nothing more." It hurts to hear her say that, even if I'm not entirely sure I believe it. With a flick of her wrist, malice flares in her eyes again, and she points to the door. "It's a cruel world out there, Samara, and men will take everything from you the moment they have the opportunity. You have to take what you want, which is precisely what I'm doing. I'm taking it back. I'm taking it all back, no matter the cost." Raph's advice burns in my memory. Words his mother has clearly lived by, words that should have served as a warning, but I was too oblivious to heed them. "You would kill all of these innocent people," I seethe. "And why? They have done nothing. You are just as horrible as the greedy men you hate." As Isa's sneer grows, I know my words are wasted breaths. "You see greed, but greed is taking what is not yours. This legacy your father wants is mine. And from the moment I learned you existed, I knew all Abraham did would be for you. Not for me or for my son, but for a stranger to our lands. All because he is a man?" Her glare turns dagger-like. "And hearing him dismiss us so easily, why wouldn't I want you both dead?" Isa sat in darkness right here the night my father and I made amends. She'd heard everything. Any affection she'd had for me vanished that night. I can feel it, cold and distant in my memory. "I am a patient woman, Samara," she says evenly. "I always knew it would come to this, which is precisely why I planned for it." But not the storms, I realize, recalling her and Raph's anger the night of their arrival, when they'd first learned of them. Her eyes cut to me. "And now you've lost the upper hand and the element of surprise," I realize aloud as it all falls into place. My killing those scouts was bad enough, making the village worry, but the wreckage washing ashore. Now everyone is on high alert. She stares at me for so long, I think she might burn a hole through me. "Your plan has fallen apart, Isa." Even now, she's uncertain her plan will still work. I can see it in the tension of her jaw. "Everyone will suspect this was you and Raph if you are the only ones to survive," I tell her. "You could still lose everything, even after we're all dead." With a cold, brittle laugh, Isa sneers. "I'll take my chances on that. The truth is, I couldn't have planned it better myself. After you were attacked, your father worried what might happen next, and has ensured the ship is secured for early departure, allowing us to get away from the mercenaries before they can kill us too. We have nothing of value. The mercenaries will want that ship more than they'll want soggy food and livestock. You're the one with riches and a fancy city." Isa shakes her head, unbelieving. "Are you so ignorant of life away from your hovel? They've already been given the money. That's not what they are here for. That's the wondrous thing about hired thugs. They'll take anything, carry out any deed without asking questions, if the price is right." My stomach curdles. She means they'll take slaves and women once our food is gone and they've grown bored with Ebonpeak. And when they're finished with us, what's to stop them from sacking Lonemore? I think about the villages and cities my father has already made amends with along the coast. All of those he's helped protect by keeping the seas safe for hundreds, maybe even thousands of people like us. If any of them ever learned what Isa's done here, The allies my father has gained over the years would never trust her. She would lose their fealty, and in turn her power, and in hiring mercs to kill us all, she's ensured his allies will never find out. Where is my father? I grind out, knowing there's only one reason Issa would bother keeping me alive. Already dead, I hope. But the shiftiness of her eyes gives her away, and she begins to pace. It's only then I understand why Hector's attention is fixed out the window. He's waiting for Raph and his men to return. Raph was supposed to be back by now, I whisper, a satisfied grin reaching from one ear to the other, and I laugh. My father probably killed him the moment, in a single stride, the back of Issa's hand collides with my face. I can taste the blood before the sting catches up with me, and I stare into Issa's enraged, black-rimmed eyes, burning with ire in the firelight. You should know by now, I taunt, licking my bottom lip as it begins to swell. You'll have to do better than that. Issa practically snarls as she stomps over to Hector. Where is he? She demands, as if he has any control over the situation. Hector never has, I think bitterly. He was a slave from the moment he was taken from his family, and has been one ever since, no matter what Raph likes to think. Remembering their nights sneaking off together makes me feel sick. Their obvious plotting, and how drunk Raph got when he found out their plans had been thwarted, and they'd be forced to remain here for the raid. How easily you both played me. I spit the blood from my mouth and glare at Hector's back. You two aren't even lovers, are you? Issa stiffens at the window, and slowly she turns to Hector. His face is almost expressionless, but I see a flicker of surprise. Or is it fear? Oh, I drawl with a mirthless laugh. So that part was true, and Mother didn't know. Issa's face burns crimson as she realizes she isn't the only schemer among her crew of villains, and I revel in it. More secrets, I mutter, and lean my head back, staring resentfully up at the ceiling. My chin trembles, and my small victory is short-lived as a few more gunshots ring outside. But it's the shouting and the sound of clanking metal that has my eyes blurring with tears despite myself. My hands clench into fists behind me. I don't know what or how, but I have to do something. I have to help them. Raph, Hector breathes with relief. There are footsteps outside, and my head lifts as the door swings open. Hector's hand falls away from his pistol as Raph steps in. You're late, Issa growls at him. Is it done? We need to leave immediately. She reaches for her cloak hanging by the door, but all I can do is glare at Raph. His black curls are damp and stuck to his face, cheeks smudged with grime, and blood stains his tunic. That look on his face. Regret. My blood burns fire hot as my eyes well with tears. Raph is back. My father isn't. My heart cracks and fissures as I struggle to get free to no avail. I trusted you, I scream. I kept your secret. Though I'm looking at Raph, I can barely see him through my tears. I think of Eric out there, and Link, of Wyatt and his grandfather, and know far too well how this will end now. Get rid of her, Issa barks. There's no use for her now. I barely hear her over my shouting, barely register the footsteps and creaking floorboards.
No,
Raph's voice cuts through the chaos.
I don't trust the mercenaries. We might still need her, perhaps to trade.
Despite myself, I meet Raph's gaze, wondering if it's shame I hear in his voice, even if I refuse to care. He made his choice. That much is clear. Fine, Issa concedes, growing impatient. Bring her. She clasps her cloak around her shoulders. But don't make me regret it, like everything else thus far. Her disdain is so obvious now. Her distance and silence wasn't apprehension or mere dislike, but hatred. Every word over the past weeks has been weighted, every stare and observation as she's been biding her time.
Don't make this harder than it already is, Samara.
Raph mutters as he walks over to me. I laugh, hysterical as it sounds. I knew I should never have trusted you. I seethe. I knew we should have killed you all when we...
You could kill us all and the mercenaries would still come, and you would be dead.
He grits out. We are anyway. I shout at him. His betrayal hurts all over again. No wonder you were so guilty when I was attacked. You knew exactly who they were because you brought them here. It was your fault. Enough! He shouts at me as Isa collects her machete from the mantel. Hector cuts the rope tying me to the chair, and I hadn't realized how tight it was until it falls away. I consider how far I might be able to run if I can get away with my hands still tied behind me. Raph swings the door open as Hector manhandles me out into the wind. The shouting and cries are haunting as they carry closer on the breeze, and the scent of burnt flesh is all too familiar. But it's the flames that lick up the walls of the village, consuming it with fury, that have my body lurching forward, twisting and tearing and trying to get away from Hector's brutal hold. I trip on the hem of my dress, but I writhe with everything I have in me. Raph comes over to help hold me. My father brought these devils to us. He let these snakes slither their way in. We all did. Gil, Link, Eric and Rory, Wyatt and his grandfather, Kenneth and Sam, Caden, Violet and her parents, Cynthia, Reynolds and Amelia. But even as a montage of faces takes shape in my mind, it's my father I see most clearly. All of his efforts wasted. All of his plans burning to the ground with this place. His distance, the blood he's shed, and the turmoil have only unleashed a plague upon us all over again. I pray Eric and some of the others are still fighting below, but as I try to convince myself that's true, the noises ripping from my throat sound almost feral with grief, and I feel just as desperate and crazed as I try to break free.
Samara, don't!
Raph says as he hauls me along, but I ignore him and thrash against him anyway, because I have nothing left to lose. I refuse to blink the watery visage of it all away, afraid to fully witness my life turning to ash around me. Whatever words are exchanged between Isa, Raph, and Hector are lost on me as my mind numbs over. Guilt sets in. Regret grips my throat, and I watch my village burn. Chapter 40.
Samara!
Raph growls, his grip tightening on my bicep.
I said stop struggling.
His gaze sears into me, a mixture of regret and warning, but I ignore any possible misgivings he might have and rear my head back, butting him in the nose. Raph curses and almost stumbles as Hector grabs onto me tighter, so as not to let me loose. You might as well kill me now, I snarl at them, because I swear I will kill all of you the first chance I get. I hate that the wind carries the venom of my words away, bringing with it the scent of smoke that makes my heart ache anew. Enough of this. We must get to the ship, Isa commands, hurrying forward. We don't have time for games, Raphael. Knock her out or kill her and be done with it. I hadn't realized Raph and Hector were being gentle with me until their grip on my arms tightens even more, their fingers pinching into my flesh as they yank me forward. My head whips back as I continue struggling, but it's a weak attempt for a semblance of control. Whatever prevents Raph from killing me is a thinning tether as his irritation grows, and though every fiber in me wants to fight and maim him, I know I must bide my time until I can form a proper plan to get free. In a sudden wash of acceptance, at least for now, I relent a little as they force me forward. I peer back at the cottage, at my home, at all that's left of my life when it was simpler, and I'd resigned myself to a fate much different than this. Fire shadows from the village play on the facade, and I tell myself to remember it, because I'll likely never see it again. The barn. When I register it, I stifle a sob. Fergus! I call, though it's weak, because there's no use begging for the life of a donkey to be saved when the raiders care nothing for the lives of innocent people.
Raph,
The ship is this way, Issa growls.
And yet we're going this way.
He growls back. He and Hector jerk me toward the side entrance of the village.
This is not the way,
Issa snarls and grabs my hair, tugging me back in protest. I shriek in pain as Hector and Raph lurch back as well.
Take your hands off my daughter.
My father's voice booms behind me. My heart stills. Raph and Hector stiffen, and we stop moving. Only when we all spin around do I see my father's heaving form, as well as his men hurrying up the path behind him, heading for the cottage. All of them are a disheveled mess of torn clothes, stained with dirt and blood, their blades glinting in the flickering light of the burning village. My father is alive. Andrik stands at his side, as does Link. All of their eyes are wild, and my heart swells. Raph was wrong.
Abraham, darling, Issa deadpans. I thought you were dead.
My father's glare shifts from her to me, and his eyes narrow to slits as he assesses me.
Raph, let Samara go.
It's only as I register the hard set of the rest of his men's faces that I start to comprehend. Either Raph thought he killed my father and failed, or he lied to his mother. When I feel the ropes tug and fall away from my raw wrists without a word of protest, I realize it's the latter. Stumbling forward, I gape at Raph in confusion. He and Hector stand side by side. Raph's clothes are splattered with blood, but it was never my father's. You were helping the men fight the mercenaries in the village, I realize. When Raph's eyes meet his mother's, a flash of sadness crosses his features.
Raphael,
she says coolly, and I can imagine the truth is blaringly obvious to her as well.
You would betray your own mother for him?
She points to my father with her machete.
When Raph told me of your plan,
my father starts, disappointment and betrayal riddling his voice.
I can't say I was entirely surprised.
2 of my father's men walk around him, but Issa doesn't notice as she glares wickedly at her son. She doesn't even fight against them as they remove the machete from her hand and apprehend her.
You are a spineless fool, Raphael.
Her voice is sharp, despite her incredulity, and though Issa tries to keep her mask of stone in place, she is clearly wounded.
A man who would take everything from you while I offer you, I don't want everything, mother. I never did.
Raph retorts.
That was your wish, your goal, but never mine.
The sadness is thick in his throat, and his shoulders hang heavy with it. Raph's darkened mood has been one fraught with indecision lately.
How noble you sound now, but that's not how you felt when we started this.
She growls, struggling to yank her arms free. The longer she stews in the men's hold, the more rage flares in her eyes, and she glares a hole through her son.
You're as much a part of this as I am. I told you I couldn't go through with this because you are weak.
She snarls, but through her anger, I hear heartbreak. In spite of Issa's hunger for power, she's a mother, fighting and providing for her son, a son who has chosen to be her enemy.
Your plan is foiled, Issa,
my father tells her, and there's a brittleness in his voice I haven't heard in so long. It gives rise to the hair on the backs of my arms.
Your mercs are dead or have fled, and thanks to Raph's warnings, most of the village has survived. I hope the years you've wasted seeking revenge were worth it. Perhaps it's something to contemplate as you take your final breath.
My father's tone teeters on defeat, and it dawns on me that another person he deeply cares for is being taken from him. Or is it sadness, realizing he never had her to begin with? My father nods to the men restraining her.
Take her away. You said you would let her live.
Raph reminds him. I glare at him. She is dangerous.
She is conniving and power-hungry, yes.
Though Raph's voice is stern, his eyes are conflicted.
But despite all she's done, she is all the family I have left. I will take responsibility for her. I will ship her to the islands or lock her up for the rest of her days if I have to. You ungrateful traitor!
Issa growls, only this time she's clawing at the men, trying to reach her son. The gleam in her eyes is murderous. After everything I've done, you would ship me off with the slaves?
Enough!
Raph barks.
You have lost, mother. Would you prefer I let them kill you instead?
Yes! She snarls. I have dedicated my life to you. All the beatings I endured to protect you, to keep you safe. All the sleepless nights, all the times I comforted you and told you I would make it right again, that I would see you had the world. Her voice breaks with desperate anger. I would rather die than live, knowing how weak you've become. Raph runs his hands through his unkempt curls as he takes a step toward her.
Then it seems allowing you to live is the most fitting punishment.
Regret laces the hardness of his tone, a dejected exhaustion that accompanies the most tortured of hearts. Hector detects it too and steps closer, resting his hand on Raph's shoulder. That infuriates Issa even more, and her eyes narrow as another of his secrets come to light. With a final nod from my father, the men drag Issa away as she curses us all. Hector flashes Raph a sympathetic look and leans in to exchange a whispered conversation.
Are you all right?
My father walks over to me, exhaustion etched in the corners of his eyes. He stops a pace away. I'm fine, I grumble, rubbing the knot in the back of my head as I watch Raph and Hector's stilted reunion. Hector was clearly worried, whatever the plan had been. I'm not sure if it's relief that rests so deep and heavy on my heart, or lingering disappointment. Raph was going to turn on you, on all of us.
But he didn't.
My father says with an air of pride as he glances in their direction. I can imagine how heartbroken my father would have been, and the disappointment he would have felt, not only in Raph, but in himself. I stare at Raph's bloodied nose. It would have been nice to know the plan, I grind out. My father sheathes his blade on his back, and I notice a pistol is shoved in his belt.
There was no time,
he says, and nods toward the smoking buildings fanned out around us.
We had a village to save, and I knew that if Issa resented me as much as Raph claimed, she'd let you live long enough to ensure my death, or for me to watch yours.
He swallows thickly, and his eyes soften. He makes a move to touch me, perhaps to reassure himself that I'm okay, but hesitates. There are no qualms between us, not now, not after everything that's happened, and leaning in, I wrap my arms around him, brimming with so much unexpected relief. My chest hurts and my muscles tremble with sudden fatigue.
We saved as many lives as we could,
my father utters, but I can tell he's mourning those he couldn't, and his arms tighten around me. My friends, I start, but I can't bring myself to finish. What if they're dead? Eric and Wyatt and...
I've only been with Link,
my father says, uncertain. I nod against him, but the urgency returns. I have to find them.
We will,
he says, pulling away.
And we must tend to the injured.
A curse pierces the night air, and my father and I turn around. A dozen paces away, Andrik clutches at his leg as Issa lunges at us, shrieking. I barely notice the men rushing for her, or Raph shouting. The knife in Issa's hand, the one I've seen sheathed at her ankle many times before, glints ominously in the night as she stabs it directly into the side of my father's throat. No! I shout as my father falls to his knees, reaching for the blade in his neck. Issa screams, then freezes as her features contort in pain, and she stumbles back.
Mother!
Raph cries. I don't register the arrow in her back until she collapses, chest heaving and clothes covered in blood. Eric lowers his bow. Wyatt runs to a halt behind him. Raph drops to Issa's side, but it's my father I crumple beside. I fall to my knees in front of him, my hands hovering dumbly over his neck as he falls onto his back. Someone help! I shout and press my hand to his wound, trying and failing to keep the blood from gushing between our fingers. He gurgles and chokes. Please! My eyes lock with his, and I want to tell him not to leave me again, not to do this when we've finally found a peace between us. His eyes fill with tears, shifting frantically over my face, and somehow, everything he's always struggled to tell me, every emotion he could never show, shines in his eyes as he fights for breath. Pride, remorse, affection. Despite the blood staining his teeth and beard, despite his garbled gasps, his face is almost peaceful with acceptance, and I choke out a sob. I feel Eric beside me, but I can't tear my gaze from my father. Please. I breathe and shake my head. I hold his throat to no avail and pray that he will stay with me just a few seconds longer. After everything, I choke out, "You can't leave me yet." But my father can only gurgle, and I throw my arms around him, absorbing his warmth before it's gone forever. "I love you," I whisper, and with a strangled inhale, he's gone. Chapter 41. Dawn is an ominous orange haze between darkening clouds, though the breeze carries the scent of smoke and death away as Hector helps me wrap my father's body for burning. We work without a word, both of us stewing in our own thoughts, and I'm grateful for the silence. Hector lifts my father's torso, and I wind a strip of cloth around him. It's an old sail material stained with mud, and blood that's not quite dry soaks through like crimson blossoms across my father's chest and shoulders. If it were any other day, we could clean and prepare our dead for the cremation ceremony, but as the clouds roil in the distance, it's only a matter of time before not even that is possible. Link helps Violet tend to her father's body. Wyatt and Eric help Caden's family with his remains, as well as Amelia, who is overwrought with grief at the loss of her father.
"Lift his head,"
Hector says softly, stirring me from my depressing thoughts, and I do as he asks. A distant voice tells me to be angry with him for not telling me the truth, knowing the whole time what Raph and Issa were planning. But it's Raph who Hector is loyal to, not me. And even if I don't like it, I understand. I say nothing as my father's blue lips and silver-streaked beard and mustache are covered first, then the broad bridge of his nose and his cheekbones, until all that's left is the lifeless weight of his head in my arms. But I don't cry. It's a foreign feeling, grieving someone you've lost and have already mourned many times over. I'm not sure if the numbness I feel is exhaustion, sadness, or disbelief. Wasn't it only weeks ago I'd preferred my father was dead rather than returned to Ebonpeak? That I had wished him miles away and hadn't trusted him? Now it's his good intentions that have gotten him killed, and I wonder if there is anything I wouldn't give for just a little bit more time with him. My gaze shifts to movement in the corner of my eye, and Raph steps through a cloud of smoke, his arms straining as he carries his mother's body down the muddy path. If Raph hadn't waited so long to tell my father about their plans, had Raph not waited until he'd gotten word the mercenaries were making their move and acted sooner, all of this could have been avoided. My father might still breathe. The village might not be in shambles. 27 people might not be injured, and innocent people might still be alive.
"Issa only accompanied us because she knew deep down Raph wouldn't go through with it,"
Hector says, his voice low, so that Raph won't hear as he passes. He doesn't spare either of us a glance.
"He cared about your father, Samara, and without his mother breathing down his neck, he would have said something sooner. I know he would have, but..."
This time I meet Hector's gaze.
"It's always been the two of them against the world,"
he explains.
"No matter what."
I don't know where Raph is taking his mother, and I don't care. But hearing the heaviness of his footsteps and seeing the red around his eyes, I can't help but feel sympathy for him, even if I don't want to. I know what it's like to lose a mother. Why are you helping me and not Raph? I ask, noticing the way Hector's eyes cling to his every movement with concern.
He wants to be left alone,
Hector answers, and when Raph disappears through the village gate, Hector slowly stands.
I'll get someone to help me move Abraham's body to the pyre,
he says. I nod, wondering if Gil and Andrik have finished with the platform yet. 14 of our dead will burn before the sun reaches the center of the sky, if we even have that long. Fleetingly, I wonder what they will do with the bodies of the raiders who have fallen, since they too were innocent in all of this. And there are still the mercenaries' bodies being dragged beyond the walls to deal with later. While they should be of no concern to us, soon enough their stench will be. Drop them off a cliff somewhere, no doubt. Let the fish feast on their flesh and bones.
Samara.
Eric's voice is hoarse with exhaustion, but when I peer over my shoulder at him, his eyes are pools of liquid amber, full of warmth and concern.
Do you need help?
I nod. Hector went to find someone to help him move my father to the pyre with the others. My gaze trails over Eric's blood-crusted arms and soot-streaked forehead. I reach up and brush the pad of my finger over a cut on his cheek. Are you all right? I ask, realizing I've been lost in a fog the past few hours, and I'm only seeing Eric, really and truly, for the first time. The blood splattered over him is mostly from others, and I wonder how many mercenaries he took down, and how many people he saved in the fight.
I'm fine,
he says, gently taking my hand in his. Thank you for what you did, I tell him. For my father. Eric shakes his head.
I wish I'd been there sooner.
Issa is no longer a threat to anyone, thanks to you, I remind him. No matter what Raph wanted, she never would have stopped her plots and scheming. I glance at the gate Raph disappeared through.
I'm just glad you'll never have to worry about her again,
he says. With a sigh, I smile, small as it might be. Andrik told me you took down 2 men who had him at their mercy, that he would have more than a limp if not for you. Eric nods, if a bit reluctant, but I see it in his eyes. Relief, and a bit of pride in himself, I think. He helped save those of us who are left, and it's one less thing he will ever have to regret. His thumb strokes my wrist.
I'm more worried about you, though.
I peer down at my father's body, wrapped up and faceless. It's easy to pretend he's someone else. I have mourned him before, I remind myself. I will be fine. Eric's eyebrows draw together, and his head shakes ever so slightly.
But this time is different,
he says carefully, and I know what he means. It's not that my father has chosen to leave me again, or that he disappeared into the unknown. This time, he is gone forever, and as I realize this, my eyes prick with tears. I will be okay, I say, breathing through the lump in my throat. Eventually. Eric wraps his arms around me and kisses the top of my head.
Yes,
he murmurs.
You will.
Chapter 42. I can't stop staring at the ship that undulates with every wave, a ship of doom, and yet filled with promise. The storm clouds churning on the horizon only echo the past few days of disquiet still veiling us all. Even after the storms, the scent of death still clings to the breeze. What's left of my father's men, no, Raph's men, prepare to return home, and here we are, left with the ashes of our loved ones, and hearts wilted like tattered sails. How raiders move on so quickly, I'll never understand. Their brothers and friends are gone, men who have been with them through storms and sieges. But maybe that's why they keep moving toward the horizon and the next adventure, rather than anchoring in any one place for too long. I hear tentative, heavy footsteps before Raph climbs the ladder to the watchtower. My jaw tightens despite his sunken eyes that stare at me, and I look away.
May I join you?
Though I know he made the right decision in the end, and I can hear the regret thick in his voice, all I see when I look at him is betrayal.
I won't insult you by apologizing, Samara.
Raph grabs the railing beside me as if bracing himself.
Of course, I am sorry, but I know that changes nothing.
I taste blood from biting my tongue before I realize there's far too much to say to remain silent. I suppose, I start, picking at the lichen on the railing. I suppose some of the hurt is self-inflicted. I knew not to trust you, told myself not to a dozen times. But I did. I believed we were friends. I shrug and exhale a bitter laugh. Perhaps because I've always had so few.
It might never have been spoken aloud, Samara, but our friendship was never imagined. I knew the moment you stumbled upon Hector and me that you were someone I could trust, and that's why I worked so hard to gain yours.
He admits.
It wasn't as if I needed to. We were already in Ebonpeak, and there was a plan set in motion even before we left home. The mercenary ship a few days behind us. But I wanted you to trust me anyway. I think I needed you to. Like, it would help me decide.
I scowl at him. I guess your plan didn't work, since you waited until the day of the raid. He looks away.
A part of me needed another reason to thwart my mother's plans. Doing so only for Abraham felt like far too much of a betrayal, even if I never wanted any harm to come to him.
His voice cracks a little.
I cared for your father more than I ever cared for my real one. I want you to know that.
I blink the sting from my eyes and swallow the emotion rising up my throat.
But Abraham was not one of us, and to take his side over my mother's, seeing the betrayal on her face, feels disgraceful, even now.
The abandoned little girl in me understands Raph's reasoning for his betrayal. She had always wanted her father's approval and compassion. For a time, he was all she had left, and she'd done everything she could think of for his love.
But knowing you, after everything you've been through,
Raph shakes his head as a memory seems to unfold.
The look on your face the day we arrived, seeing the hurt when you saw your father standing there after so long, it stayed with me.
Crossing his arms over his chest, Raph leans against the corner post. He's tall enough that his curls brush the redwood overhang as they catch in the breeze.
But I was too late,
he whispers.
And now he is dead anyway.
I tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear and blink into the graying afternoon. I'm conflicted, I admit, exhaling the gravity of this life we were born into. Some of my friends are dead. Our home is destroyed. My father has been taken from me. Again. But still, it could have been far worse. Though it's a reminder to myself, a part of me wants to soothe my friend's raw heart just a little. Neither one of us says more as we sit with our thoughts. I consider the past, grieve the present, and contemplate the future, whatever it may be. The uncertainties I had yesterday are imminent, life-altering decisions today, and I wonder what my mother would do if she were the one standing here instead of me. I'm not sorry Isa is dead, I admit, but I am sorry you lost your mother. Raph's eyes, dim with exhaustion and sadness, drift to mine, and his lips press into a thin line.
And I have taken your father from you. I will never forgive myself.
He blinks and swallows thickly.
I am so sorry.
I bite my cheek, staring out at the ship. Fathers are strange, aren't they? I think aloud. They are there to shape us and make us stronger, which ours did in their own twisted ways. I sigh and lean my head against the post. But in my experience, losing a mother is what leaves a hole in your heart that can never be filled. Raph doesn't bother to wipe the stray tears from his cheek.
I know it is too soon, and you hate me, but do you think you will ever be able to forgive me?
I picture Raph boarding his ship and never coming back, and a pang of sadness twists my heart. I imagine our paths are intertwined in one way or another, so I don't know that I'll have much of a choice. I look at him and watch as the tension in his shoulders seems to ease a little.
Would a good thrashing help?
I can't help a quirk of a smile, and I lift my shoulder. Perhaps. Raph huffs a relieved sort of laugh before the deep lines in his furrowed brow return.
I am so sorry,
he whispers again.
For all of it. For not telling you about the men, especially after what they did to you in the orchard. For lying about Hector.
Hector? I step back to look at him. Lie about what?
About my reason for sneaking out with him.
But, I frown. But you are with Hector, aren't you? Raph's head tilts slightly, his black eyebrows lowering in confusion.
No, he drawls. Not the way I led you to believe, anyway.
I sputter a laugh. You're joking, right? I think of the two of them, inseparable in every way, and how worried Hector was when Raph was gone for too long on the night of the raid. I've seen the two of you together.
As friends,
Raph clarifies, but there's a thread of regret in his tone that gives me pause.
As best friends, as brothers.
I eye Raph carefully, wondering if he truly believes that. You have no feelings for Hector, then? I clarify. Raph's eyes divert to the sea, and I let out a relieved breath. I'm not sure why it matters to me that Raph and Hector are happy together, but it does. Deeply. Two boys whose worlds have been thrust together and wielded by monsters. He cares about you too, Raph, I tell him. Once again, I see the look of longing in his eyes that peels me to the core. Fear, uncertainty. Whatever you are or aren't with Hector is no one's business anyway. I'm just surprised, is all.
I can't imagine my life without him,
Raph admits. His voice is far softer than I've ever heard, and it dawns on me why he hasn't let himself admit just how deeply their connection runs. Your mother can't hurt him anymore, Raph, I assure him and rest my hand on his. Or you. Raph exhales, long and steady, and my eyes flick closed as I lean my head against his shoulder. The pregnant silence surrounds us, and I can only imagine what the last 6 years have been like for him. It will all work out the way it's supposed to, I say. But I'm not only thinking about Hector and Raph. Everything we've been through has to have been for something. I allow the tension in my shoulders to lessen a little as I breathe out what feels like a lifetime's worth of exhaustion. What happens now? I feel Raph's cheek lift from the top of my head.
You could come home with me,
he says, a hopeful lilt in his voice.
You have an empire to expand, relationships to build, and trade routes to run.
I chuckle at the thought and look at him. I agreed with my father's plans for commerce and allied nations, but it is not my empire, nor do I want it.
Then help me see it through,
he amends.
Come back with me, and help me rid Oaxaca and the seas of what remains of my father. Your people need this, especially now. Help me give it to them.
The truth of that aches in the center of my chest, and I lean forward, resting my elbows on the wooden railing. Leave this place and them when so much needs to be done? I shake my head, uncertain I can.
You're scared, Samara, but you want change. I know you do. Your trips to the forest and the sunken city,
You want to protect your people and provide for them. And this is the way you will do it. It might be the only way you can truly make a difference. I look at Raph askance, wondering how he can sound so sure of himself. Then I remember it's Raph, and he's a smug ass when he wants to be. You know me so well?
I understand you,
he amends.
but you can spare us the time and energy of my goading and coaxing you and simply say yes.
I shrug. I could, I admit, but what would be the fun in that? He's thoughtful, a long lost look in his eyes as his mouth twitches with amusement. Or maybe it's a calm contentment I feel as he smiles to himself, as if he's admiring something beautiful.
You love the waves here, but back home?
He says, squinting into the horizon as if he can already see it.
At home, the waters are blue and clear, and the ragged cliffs look like they've risen from the ocean floor. They don't roll with green like they do here. There are mountains protecting the hidden oasis of the sea. There is a fishing village like yours, and beyond it, in the depths of the forest, is the capital, with buildings built of green volcanic stones that shimmer in the sunlight, and the market in the center of the city.
He shakes his head.
No one hides behind walls there,
he says.
No one lives in fear.
It sounds wonderful, I admit. Raph elbows me.
We're agreed then,
he says. I haven't agreed to anything.
But you have, Samara. You just don't know it yet.
He musters a playful wink. I roll my eyes. There's the arrogant Raph I know so well. But to be honest, I'm not sure I can handle being stuck with you for weeks at sea.
Nor I, with a stubborn woman like you. But we'll manage somehow.
Even with a heavy cloud of gloom around us, I feel relief in the ease between us. And in spite of my need to fling a snarky remark at him in return, I try to imagine a future with Raph in it. 2 orphans changing the world? I ask, barely refraining from a laugh.
There are far stranger things.
Really? I deadpan.
Like what?
Like you and Eric, he says dubiously. You chose him? Really?
My knuckles collide with Raph's jaw hard enough to give me pleasure.
Ow!
He gapes at me in shock, then rubs the side of his face.
I suppose I deserved that.
Yes, you did. And you were right. I feel a bit better now. Raph drops his hand to his side and stares at the ship, his home away from home.
I have to admit, when I leave, I will miss Eric's constant glaring and...
Which he did with good reason, clearly, I chide. He wasn't fooled like the rest of us. He knew those men in the orchard were connected to you, that you... I inhale a calming breath and fist my hands to steady myself. Raph sobers, his arrogance falling away again. And suddenly, his dirty fingernail is far more interesting than my love life. Look, it doesn't matter, I say, because it doesn't, not anymore. But you will find a way to be friends, if you know what's good for you, I warn, especially if you want me on that ship. Raph gives me a side-eyed look through his lashes.
I will make peace with him, he says, if he'll let me. But you have to do something for me too.
I eye him skeptically.
You must take your father's place in this, he says, and you must address your people.
Chapter 43. Raph and I make our way toward the pier from the watchtower. A promenade of raiders and villagers haul carts with mercenary bodies along the cliff to dispose of. Though the rain has temporarily stopped for our day of cleansing, everyone is somber and broken still. Andrik, limping with each step, and a handful of others, injured from the raid, are determined to rid us of enemy bodies regardless.
I will help them,
Raph says when he spots Hector among them, but he turns me toward the pelt storage and tanning shack, both nearly demolished during the attack.
but he was looking for you earlier.
Eric hammers new siding into place where the storage wall was busted down in order to protect what's left of the hides from the next storm. It breaks my heart to see so much of his hard work, what took hours and days to clean and treat and dry, destroyed in a single night. Eric must sense me, because he lowers the hammer and glances over his shoulder in my direction. His eyes dart between Raph's retreating form and me, but his expression gives nothing away. "You're almost done," I say, walking toward him. His stack of siding is nearly gone. He nods, watching Raph as he catches up with Hector.
"Is everything okay?"
Eric's voice is soft and careful as he takes in the sight of me. Flashing him a slight, reassuring smile, I shrug. "I needed some time alone to think, is all. Then Raph found me and said you were looking for me." That surprises Eric enough to make his eyebrow twitch. He studies every inch of my face, like he's trying to fill in the pieces of my conversation with Raph for himself.
"Will you forgive him?"
Eric asks, and I can't tell if he's hoping I won't. "I'm angry," I admit, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't understand why he was conflicted. I noticed the wounds on Eric's hands from fighting and building and cleaning up Raph's mess. Pushing my anger aside, I try to smile. "Why is it you always need patching up?" I tease. Eric huffs, clearly amused, and turns my palm over, eyeing the rope burns not yet healed on my wrist.
"I could say the same for you."
"I guess we're quite the pair then," I say sadly, because even as I try to make light of it, I know there's more to repair than just buildings and homes.
"Are we?"
Eric asks, and his tentative words surprise me.
"A pair, I mean."
I swallow the ball of dread forming in my throat. "Aren't we?"
"I assumed you were leaving with Raph, now that, well, after everything, and he returned from the watchtower without missing limbs, so you must not completely hate him."
Eric releases my hand, allowing it to fall back down to my side. All I can do is stare into the tempest alive in Eric's eyes, searching for a shred of promise I can hold on to. "Do you think I should hate him?" The loose strands of my hair whip between us, and I expect Eric to scoff at the question, especially after losing some of his friends to Raph's treachery.
"It's no secret, I've never liked him,"
Eric admits.
"but in the end, whether it was because of you or his conscience, whatever the reason, he saved most of us, and I can't hold that part against him, even if I want to."
An unexpected smile sneaks between my lips, and it feels as if one more wrong has morphed into something strangely right.
"And if you don't hate him either, I assumed you would leave with him."
I bite my lip, my father's and Raph's words circling in my head, but staring into Eric's eyes makes it all the more difficult to decide. "I probably will," I whisper. "Will..." I swallow thickly, saying the next words with far more hope than I probably should. "Will you consider going with me?" Eric's gaze shifts from my eyes to my mouth before he looks away, pondering it as he peers past me at nothing in particular.
"Can I think about it?"
he says carefully. Though it's not the answer I'd hoped for, it isn't the one I dreaded either. "Of course. We leave in a month, once the storms start to disperse and the village is livable again." I don't dare look away, not wanting to give Eric any reason to question my desire for him to go. "You have until then to decide." I know it's silly to feel slighted in his wanting to stay behind, if that's what he chooses. Eric and I are new, and our entire lives are here. He has his father and friends to consider, but for me, it's just, I add, wanting him to understand. Staying here is different for me than it is for you. He studies me, thoughtful as he listens. You have your father and your work. You have Wyatt. I have you, and I want to stay with you. I rush to say, I really do. It's just, the life my father has laid out for me is an ocean away. It seems wrong to deny myself the chance to at least glimpse what it would be. Eric cups my cheek.
I don't blame you for wanting to leave, Samara. There is pain here and regret. And you're right, I have people here I care about, people I feel obligated to care for and protect. But being here without you also feels wrong.
His gaze moves over the curves and lines of my features and lingers on my lips.
I just want to make sure they will be okay if I go with you.
I can hear it in his voice, the hesitant longing I feel even more for him today than I did yesterday, and I nuzzle his hand. I want nothing more than to push the world away for a little while longer and be with Eric, just the two of us, to hold each other and simply breathe and live, to process all that's happened without everyone's eyes and expectations weighing on me, on us. I understand. I want them to be okay too. Leaning in, Eric presses his lips to mine and exhales a sigh. Whatever his decision, I know it will be the right one, because despite what Eric might think, he doesn't know how to fail those he loves, and I admire him all the more for it. Chapter 44. 1 month later. Sweat drips down my brow. My arm muscles strain, as does my side. I'm trying to take it easy, knowing I'm still not entirely healed from my ordeal in the orchard, but I've never been able to resist a good fight. The ground is drier than it's been in days, solidifying under my boots, now that the bulk of the storms seem to have dispersed for a break in the season. Elbows fly, grunts fill the afternoon air, yet somehow Eric chokeholds me, as he usually does when we're sparring, and I'm at his mercy. Temporarily, at least.
Give in yet?
His lips brush the shell of my ear, sending a warm chill over me. I smirk. You've resorted to distraction already? You must be getting desperate. His chuckle is low and reverberates through me as his muscles flex around my neck in warning. I can't resist. I bite the crook of his elbow, shocking him, and his hold loosens.
I can't believe you bit me,
he says, only half thwarted. There's an all too familiar glint of amusement in his eyes. Believe it, I tell him, spinning around. I learned a long time ago I need to use every single weapon I have. I gnash my teeth at him playfully, and his eyebrow rises with intrigue.
I think I liked it better when you guys were fighting for real.
Link mutters from the sidelines. Don't be jealous, I tease. I'll beat you next. Eric and I walk over to him as he observes Violet and Wyatt more intently than usual. Hands on my hips, I watch the two of them as I catch my breath. She's getting better, I muse. I study Violet's blocks to Wyatt's left and right hook. Her movements are no longer tentative, and her arms fly up with intent. It's good to see she can tie her hair back and get gritty with the rest of us. The smudge of dirt on Violet's perfect cheek makes me proud of her in an offhanded way. Has Wyatt taken her down yet?
No, thankfully.
Link grumbles.
She shouldn't even be sparring, not in her condition.
Both Eric's and my gazes dart to Link, and I'm pretty certain I gasp. She's pregnant? Link looks at me, and whatever concern was in his eyes softens.
Yeah, at least she thinks she is.
Even though they've only been married a month, they've been living together for nearly a year, so it was only a matter of time. Retrieving my axe from where it leans against a cypress, I shake my head. It's all starting to make more sense. Of course Violet would want to learn how to protect herself and her soon-to-be babe after the mercs raided the village last month, especially since she also lost her father. I sheath my axe in my backstrap.
Yeah, well,
Link sighs.
I would prefer it if she waited until after the baby comes to start getting beat up.
I elbow him. She'll be fine. You did good asking Wyatt to help her. I say, he's patient and far more forgiving than Eric or I would be. Yeah, no shit, he mutters, glancing between us. The scrapes on my arms sting, but it's the shiner already forming on Eric's temple I admire. He winks at me, and butterfly wings flutter inside me.
I would teach her,
Link says, distracted.
but she says I'm too easy on her.
If that's true, then she's right to spar with someone else, Link. He glares at me. I'm serious. If Violet is going to learn all she can before she can't practice anymore, she can't waste time with you holding her hand. Let her do this. It will give her peace of mind.
You're just happy she's finally taking your advice,
he grumbles. Aren't you? I mean, they're just doing hand-to-hand stuff, Link. She'll be fine, I reassure him. With a sigh, he lowers his chin, thoughtful for a few more heartbeats as we watch Wyatt with her. Violet's dark flowing hair and medium frame to his lanky, looming build and floppy red hair. While she's slightly timid, he's patient, and I know it's caregiving for his grandfather that makes him a great teacher, like Gil used to be. Maybe snares will never be Wyatt's thing, I say, but I think he'd be a good instructor. Maybe he's the one who should take Gil's place. When Eric says nothing, I peer up at him. He watches Wyatt with pride and admiration.
Maybe.
He's been quieter than usual lately. Are you worried about your father? I ask, and only then do I realize I've been waiting with bated breath for him to change his mind about leaving with me.
Always,
he admits.
I'm not sure I know any different.
He folds his arms over his chest as he studies Wyatt's arm block.
I've taken care of my father for so long. I don't remember what it's like not to. I don't want that to be my life, though.
Eric's eyes drift to mine.
This is a new beginning, for all of us.
His words make my heart patter and stumble and start racing all at once.
It's time.
The three of us turn around to find Hector standing on the crest of the hill, motioning for us to head back to the village. A rush of nerves ruffles through me, and the heaviness sets in again. Eric must sense it because he takes my hand.
Come on,
he whispers. I look at Link. He's already watching me, his eyes sad, even if he's trying not to be. It's only for a few months, I remind him, but it's not nearly as straightforward as that. I've never left Ebonpeak, let alone Link and everything I've ever known. I've never seen the world awaiting me beyond the old California coast.
Vi,
Link calls, and she and Wyatt pause mid-armbar, their chests heaving.
It's time to say goodbye.
I don't miss the flash of sadness in Wyatt's eyes either, or the way his gaze darts to Eric. Brothers in every way that matters, and they'll be separated for the first time too. I squeeze Eric's hand this time, and the five of us make our way down the path in silence. The cypress creak in the breeze, the red-winged blackbirds chirping as they flit from one branch to the other as if it's just another day. But it's not. Without my father to lead this new endeavor, there is far more apprehension than Gil or I are comfortable with, which is why we've encouraged most of Ebonpeak to stay behind, for now. The silence is thick between the five of us. Even if we have lived in a drawn-out state of uncertainty and fear, we've never uttered a goodbye to one another or been apart for more than a few days. We'll be back before you know it, I tell them when I can't take the quiet any longer. I glance back at Link and Violet, walking hand in hand behind us.
A lot will be different in 6 months,
Wyatt says beside Eric, but his words are more thoughtful than sad.
You're right.
Eric looks at him.
With you and my father running the tanning shack, he'll probably forget all about me by the time I get back.
The corner of Wyatt's mouth lifts with a smile.
I doubt it.
Eric grabs Wyatt's shoulder playfully.
Just don't let him work you too hard.
I'm not sure he'll have the chance, Wyatt says, his gaze darting toward the east. I'm not sure how long Link and I will be in the desert lands. I try to imagine the world beyond the scorched forest, and though I worry for Link and Wyatt's safety, I know it is something we've all wondered about since my first journey into the mountains, with every peace offering and gift we've found waiting for us in the forest since. And just think, I tell them, a year or so from now, you might all be moving east, or sailing to Oaxaca to join us. With our families, Violet murmurs. Though fear and sadness accompanies so much change, hope and excitement does too, and I smile. True. I glance between Violet and Link again, admiring the pair of them. A part of me wonders if 10 years from now, despite Violet's reluctance to embrace our lifestyle, they will be the Olivia and Abraham of the village, because if I've learned anything, it's that life here is full of surprises. Congratulations, Violet, I say, and when her eyes crinkle in the corners, I know she understands my meaning. Thank you. We continue past the village and down the cliff to the pier where the last of Raph's men are loading into the rowboats. My heart flutters when I see Rory pacing on the dock, hands on his hips. He pauses when he sees Eric, and I wait for guilt to fill Eric's eyes for leaving his father behind. But it never comes.
I hope you don't get seasick,
Link says as we make our way onto the beach.
That would suck.
Who needs the sea to feel sick? I mutter. My nerves have been coiled with apprehension for days.
You'll be fine, Mar.
He promises.
You don't know how to be weak.
Ha! Not true. But our banter peters out as the moment finally arrives and settles over us in a thick cloud of anticipation. Eric embraces his father, clapping him on the back as both men utter what few words they can manage, too muffled to hear. As Raph lowers my trunk into our boat with Hector, I realize this is it. My hands sweat and my throat clogs with all the things I want to say. We stop on the pier, and I turn to Link. His dark eyes shimmer, and he swallows thickly. Take care of everyone, I tell him, especially Fergus. You know he gets grumpy when he doesn't get attention. I wrap my arms around Link's shoulders, squeezing desperately, conveying all I want to say but can't seem to. And don't do anything stupid. You have a family to think about now.
You be careful.
I squeeze my eyes shut. I will see you soon. And just think, if your dad and Cynthia love the tropics, you might decide to uproot your family to the south too. Don't mosquitoes and floods sound exciting? Link smiles against my cheek.
Yeah, they're starting to. This place won't be the same without you. But who knows? You might miss us too much and decide to return sooner.
Maybe. Link gives me a final squeeze, and it feels like every single moment between us, every touch and embrace, every tear and curse and laugh culminates until my heart is aching.
You're going to be great at this, Mar,
he whispers, and his voice is so reverent, I almost believe him. I need to believe him. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it? We'll send a ship with supplies in a few months, I promise. Always the stronger of the two of us, Link finally pulls away.
I know you will.
I wipe a stray tear from my cheek and offer Violet a watery smile. Take care of him for me, I say, and I give her a quick hug. You know I will, she whispers. Yeah, I let out a breathy laugh. I do. It's all Violet has been trying to do since the day they met. Straightening, I wait for Eric to say his goodbyes in the manly way guys do, with a bear hug and rough pat on the back. Though when he hugs Wyatt, his hold lingers, his arms nearly swallowing Wyatt whole.
Thanks for looking after my pops,
he says roughly, and with a final pat, Eric steps back, and we both heave a reluctant breath. Gil limps his way down the pier, Cynthia behind him, both with sacks slung over their shoulders. I take Eric's hand, nodding toward the rowboat so Link and his father can have a moment together. With a final wave, we lock eyes with our friends one more time and turn for the boat.
Time will pass quickly,
Eric says, but I don't know if he's saying it for his benefit or mine. I hope so. There will be a lot to do when we arrive in Oaxaca, even if it's still weeks away. A city to placate in the wake of Isa's and my father's deaths. New weather to navigate and dangers to brave.
You two ready for this?
Raph says, and though his voice is soft with understanding, his eyes sparkle with mischief. Why don't I like the sound of that? I mutter, and take his hand as he helps me step down into the rowboat.
Oh, come on, Samara. It's only another adventure, and you'll have Hector and me the whole way through. And me.
Eric reminds him as he steps in behind me. He stares at Raph's proffered hand as if he's offended Raph would even suggest it, and that makes Raph smile. They might not be friends, but I've heard them planning and carrying on plenty of civilized conversations the past couple of weeks, and I know their dislike for one another is more of familiarity than anything else at this point. Taking a seat on one of the trunks stuffed with goods for my new home, I lay my axe across my lap and peer out at La Condesa anchored in the cove, our lodging for the next few weeks. Hector pushes our boat off the dock, and he and Eric row us toward the ship, Gil, Cynthia, and Raph close behind. It doesn't seem real, and yet I watch our friends drift farther and farther away. Within a handful of moments, they are small dots on the pier, and the ship's deck is hard beneath my feet. Raph's crew calls out to one another, Andrik at the helm of it all, and the sails fall open. The hollers and clinks become white noise as they prepare to set sail. The whipping banner above me catches my eye, and I stare up at it flapping in the wind. The serpent in the eagle's talons. I laugh at the impossibility of it all. Only months ago, we thought this ship would be our destruction. I think aloud. On cue, the ship begins to move, and at the bizarre feeling, I brace my hand on the mast. When Eric says nothing, I look over my shoulder at him. He watches our village shrink in the distance.
A few months ago,
he finally replies, taking my hand in his.
A lot of things were different.
He leads me to the stern of the ship, wanting to see the last glimpse of home before it's gone, perhaps forever. Are you having second thoughts? I ask, afraid of the answer. It's not too late to.
No.
Eric tucks a lashing strand of hair behind my ear, and his eyes shift over my face as a small smile parts his lips.
No second thoughts. I've had too many regrets when it comes to you, Samara. This isn't one of them. It never will be.
I swallow the hope that it's true, that we're doing the right thing, the goodbyes, the unknown, the excitement. It's alive and nearly suffocating, making my vision blur.
Are you having second thoughts?
He asks, sobering a little.
Do you want to stay here, at home?
No, I say easily. I'm not having second thoughts. A curious anticipation fills his eyes, unconvinced.
Are you sure?
I nod, then shake my head because it's all so strange, and just like the storm clouds part to beseeching sunlight, it suddenly seems so clear to me. The truth is, I'm not sure I've ever felt like I belonged here anyway. I've never felt settled, like it was ever really home. Not after my mother died, anyway. My fingers trail the head of my axe at my hip, and I think of her. May it give you courage when you need it, provide you warmth when you are cold, and remind you of me while you are away. Like a scabbard fitted perfectly to my sharp edges, Eric wraps his arm around my shoulders and pulls me closer, pressing his lips to my temple.
Then it's time to change that,
he whispers. Yes, I guess it is. And as my mother's final wishes fill my head, a tear escapes my lashes. Show your father how strong you are on this trip. Show him the strength I see in you, and make him proud. I want nothing more than to make my parents proud, and I smile. Wind blowing in my hair, and the open sea undulating around us, Eric and I peer into the unknown, bound for a life together we never could have predicted. And as unexpected as it is, for the first time, I feel whole. Epilogue. 8 months later. In the months since arriving in Oaxaca, I've come to appreciate the vibrant colors boasted in the markets, tapestries, and clothing worn by everyone around me. I've learned to revel in the verdant vines that grow along the buildings and come to rely on the chime of church bells to break up my day. But more than that, The proximity of the water soothes me. Though it's minutes away on horseback instead of mere steps, I can hear it on the breeze, a distant, constant hum through the balcony windows. The mosquito netting flutters in the open doorway, sending the pages of my ledger furling. I stare down at the list of tasks that must be finished before Raph's return, knowing I should stay focused or the time will pass far too slowly. Additional provisions for 24, secure lodging with the locals, 3 barrels of mezcal, and feast preparations are all crossed off my list. Insect repellent. However, I circle that one twice. That is something I am still adjusting to, and if I'm not prepared, might scare Violet away. I glance up at Hector from my desk. He's lost in thought, just as he has been all day, sketching trade routes on the map he finally finished in Raph's absence. I can imagine the lines of trajectory well enough, the northern routes connecting to the salt mines in Baja, and the southern passages to the piña and coffee plantations. While my mind is a jumble of anticipation, Hector is as focused as he always is, his intent apparent in the purse of his lips. My mother used to tell me my mouth would stay that way if I weren't careful, I tell him. Slowly, Hector pries his attention from the unrolled scroll and looks at me, confused. I make a contorted face at him. With a huff, he shakes his head.
I thought you had preparations to make in town.
I shrug. I do, but Hector spares me another glance.
The ship won't arrive any sooner if you stay here, Samara.
I roll my eyes. Why aren't you more anxious? This is Raph's first voyage without you. Ever. And he's been gone for months. I would think you'd be stewing in wait, or finding things to do at the harbor at least. Hector shakes his head, bending over his map once more.
Unlike you,
he says, already distracted again.
Focus helps me pass the time.
There's a clink of silver, and when I look up, Marta appears in the doorway. The middle-aged woman bows slightly, her brow glistening in the heat, and the wisps of hair around her face catch in the breeze. Agua de Jamaica, miss? I tilt my head with a sigh. Thank you, Marta, but you don't have to wait on me. I can get my own tea.
But you won't,
Hector mutters, not bothering to look up from his map.
You still act like you're only a guest in this house.
Marta ignores me completely and sets the tray on the edge of my desk. Unlike Raph and Hector, I can't stand my desk to be messy, so there's plenty of room. Every item has a stack or drawer it belongs in, or a place on one of the shelves that line the library. Marta fills a ceramic cup with purple water, slightly chilled, and the scent of hibiscus and ginger fills my nose. She sets a sugar-powdered concha on a small plate beside my cup, and my mouth begins to water. I never knew bread could be so decadent until I tried Marta's baking, and unable to resist, I take a bite. She flashes me a knowing grin. Anything else, miss? I allow myself a small, sheepish smile. No. Thank you. With a nod, she leaves the tray a moment to wrangle the mosquito net that's come loose in the doorway. Unnecessary with the breeze, she ties it back with a strip of finely woven cloth that looks far too expensive to be used as a drape tie. I've come to expect such things in this house, though. Everything, from the drapes to the decorative pillows on the divan that no one uses, is luxurious and embroidered in intricate patterns or fringed in gold. It's garish in a way, or so I used to think. It's also stunning and a tribute to the artistry of this world away from home. "Their mister has finally left your side," Marta murmurs with amusement as she walks over to fluff the blanket on the divan. I've used it on more than one late night in the library. Though I fold the blanket every time, she refolds it all the same. The mister, I start, was invited to hunt with some of the other men. Though Eric and I aren't married, Marta refuses to call him anything other than Mr. or my husband, since we sleep unwed in the same quarters. While there was judgment at first, Marta has learned to accept my gods are not her gods, but razzes me every chance she gets. As silly as it is, our banter is something I appreciate. Since arriving, I've worked so hard to show the servants, the entire city, I am not like Issa, that I don't want slaves. I wouldn't know what to do with them even if I did. I would never tell Raph, but the more time that passes, the more I understand why his mother clung so desperately to her power here. Issa was losing it long before they set sail for Ebonpeak. I saw it as sadness settled over the servants when they heard what happened to my father, and in the hope that glimmered in their eyes when they learned who I was, and most acutely, in the way they averted their gazes when Raph announced his mother's death. Issa saw the Oaxacans as a means to an end. To me, these people are no different than my own, despite their brightly woven clothes and penchant for sumptuous foods. They work to survive and find joy in the smallest things after having been through enough bloodshed to last a lifetime. Like us, they've lived their lives in fear and know that we mean to change that. Quick, heavy footsteps sound in the hall, and Eric stops in the doorway, his large frame filling it. Gripping the jam, he leans in, his face inscrutable. I jump to my feet. I thought you were hunting. Hector glances up, and even Marta pauses from fussing with the throw pillows.
I was, but...
I frown. What is it? My heart skitters a little as I hold my breath. An accident in the rock mines? A crocodile attack? A dysentery outbreak? My mind loops with a dozen things that might have gone wrong, things that have gone wrong since our arrival. Finally, Eric grins.
I spotted La Condesa.
Oh, you? I toss one of the breads from the tray at him. Eric catches it, and with dancing eyebrows, he tears off a piece with his teeth.
I knew you were in here stewing,
he says through a mouthful,
so I thought you should know.
Hector and I both head toward the door.
And,
Eric continues,
I've asked to have your horses and the cart readied for the fishing village.
Hector nods in gratitude and hurries past him. Of course you did, I whisper. I'll send the cart drivers ahead, Marta offers and scuttles into the hall. Thank you, I tell her as I stop beside Eric, glaring at him, but I can't force it for long. Preparing the horses was clever, I say and lift up on my toes to kiss him. It's the only reason I'm not kicking your butt for your little jest. He grins against my mouth before leaning away.
You should try,
he says, waggling his eyebrows again as he tears off another bite of bread. We laugh, and he follows me into the dark, cool hallway.
Plus,
he says behind me,
I know how impatient you are, and that you're still terrible at saddling your own horses.
I wave him away, not bothering to argue with him. I'd thought I was more than capable of surviving in this place, but the truth of it is, if it weren't for Eric and, well, everyone, I would probably have given up already. For all its beauty, Oaxaca is also harsh and terrifying. Raph was right. There are rains more violent than back home that overflow the trenches and cause landslides and mud pits that people die in weekly. The insects and spiders are so large, I refuse to sleep in full darkness. Hurrying through the sitting room and the dining hall, I step out into the hacienda's courtyard, where Hector is already mounting his black horse. My gray is waiting for me, pulling anxiously at his bit, and Eric's tan horse perks up at the sight of him. Oh, Gil, where is he?
At the docks with Cynthia,
Hector says, adjusting his horse's reins.
They went out on the fishing boats this morning.
I nod as I climb into my saddle. What if everyone's come all this way and they hate it here?
They won't,
Eric and Hector say at the same time, and they nudge their horses into motion. But what if they do? Patting Storm's neck, I nudge him onward as well.
They will need time to adjust,
Hector tells me.
Just as you did. Now come on. You've been waiting for this day for months.
Eric grins at me as our horses quicken.
Don't worry,
he teases.
If they don't like it, they only have to wait a year or so to return home.
When we arrive at port, La Condesa's sails are lowered like wings, outstretched and ready to soar through the sea in the afternoon breeze. Eric and Hector dismount their horses as I take in the sounds and whirl of movement. Planks creak beneath people's feet, chains clank, sails snap in the wind, and the waves lap against the pier as everyone disembarks. The drivers fill their carts with trunks, and La Condesa's crew unloads barrels and lowers crates onto the pier. And all of it gives me pause. It's people's belongings and livelihoods. My peoples. A joy I hadn't expected fills me. Eric takes our horses as I run my hands down my vest, strangely nervous seeing so many familiar faces. Gil and Cynthia are already hugging passengers in welcome. I realize that everything since the day my father returned to Ebonpeak has been in preparation for this day. My friends coming here to start a better life. Tilly walks with the blacksmith, Brom with Amelia, and then Link's black hair catches my eye. The moment he sees me, and his smile grows from ear to ear, the image of him blurs. He helps Violet step onto the platform, and I'm taken aback. There's a baby in her arms. Knowing it must have come early, I'm even more grateful to see the three of them than I ever thought possible. Wyatt and Rory hoot when they see Eric stalking toward them, and Raph jumps down from the boarding ramp onto the dock with his ever-present smirk in place, though he isn't looking at me, but at Hector. When their eyes meet, Raph's arrogance evaporates to something far more humble and relieved. The two of them embrace, hands clamping each other's shoulders, but it's that unspoken connection between them, a longing they don't dare give voice, that stirs something inside me. But then Raph does something I don't expect, and he pulls Hector into him, his eyes closing, only for a moment. It's a small step for them, but a step all the same, and I smile. Clapping his hand on Hector's back, Raph takes a step back, utters something I can't discern in the commotion, and comes toward me. "You missed me," he says, far too sure of himself. "Of course not," I lie. Raph chuckles and wraps his arms around me, squeezing me tight. "Liar." "How did it go in Baja?" I ask, wondering if the meeting with their governor was as smooth as I prayed it would be without my presence. While I have my good name, being my father's daughter, Raph has his mother's treacherous legacy to follow him. "I'm alive, aren't I? And before you ask, so is the governor." I'm about to spew a few more questions at him, but Raph holds up his hand. "I need ale and sleep, Samara. At least the ale part before you interrogate me." He nods to Link, coming up behind him. "Besides, you have a village to welcome." Knowing he's all too pleased that I'll be occupied and he can go get into trouble, I arch an eyebrow and sigh, resigned. Raph pats my shoulder and steps past me. Once again, I feel a tug in my chest seeing Link and his family, and the warmth around my heart returns. "You came," I murmur as he steps onto the dock. Violet peers around his shoulder, her babe swaddled in her arms. "You all came," I say, wiping the tears from my scarred cheek as I look down at her sleeping baby. "I didn't expect 3 of you quite yet." I glance between the 2 new parents, smiling with pride. "I was further along than I thought," Violet admits with a shrug. "This is little Mara." I freeze, my eyes locking on Link's for only a split second before I realize Violet can't possibly be okay with that, and I look at her. Her smile broadens. "It wasn't the same without you back home," she says, almost shyly. "It just felt right." I choke out a happy sob. "Really?" Violet nods, and I lean closer to the tiny swaddled cherub in her arms. "Well, hello there, little Mara," I coo, and gently I stroke her soft cheek. "We're going to get into so much trouble together." Link snorts. "I'd have it no other way." I wink at him and wrap my arms around his shoulder, squeezing him so tightly he groans. I've missed you," I breathe. "I was certain you'd come back from the desert lands safe enough, but I wasn't sure you'd want to make the voyage here, especially with Violet being pregnant." I look at her, or with a newborn. "It was rough," Violet admits, her eyes tired though smiling. "But everything worthwhile in this life is," Link adds, "which is why we wanted to come. We knew we'd regret not checking it out at least." I nod, beyond grateful that everyone I care about is finally in one place. It's different here, I confess, but it's beautiful, and the people, they are the best part. They make it all worth it. Link takes the baby when he spots his father.
There's someone else she needs to meet,
he says, and I nod as Link braces himself for another happy reunion.
Samara!
Raph calls from the platform, and when I glance over, I nearly stumble. Fergus! He brays as I run over to him. I look at Raph. You brought Fergus!
Of course we did. We know how much you love a stubborn ass,
he says as Eric comes up behind me.
Funny.
He deadpans. I drop down to rub Fergus's neck and wrap my arms around him. Hey, boy. I bet you hated that trip, didn't you? He brays again in answer.
So, you made it back, I see,
Eric says, and holds his hand out to Raph.
You can't get rid of me that easy.
He chuckles. They shake hands, and though Eric's expression gives nothing away, his eyes shimmer with sincerity, emanating that silent understanding they've seemed to forge between them over the months.
It looks like our girl is in one piece,
Raph muses, nudging me as I stand up. Eric grins.
Barely. She's convinced a spider will eat her in her sleep.
Spiders? Violet shrieks behind me. I cringe. Oh, they're nothing to worry about, I say, not wanting her to fret her first 5 minutes in this country. Violet eyes me closely, and I force a smile.
Come on,
I tell her, leading her and Fergus toward the cart. There is so much I want to show you all. I wave everyone to follow so we can begin our trek to the city, and while the others chatter and laugh and groan with exhaustion, I allow myself a deep breath of relief and contentment, because as Wyatt regales Eric of his trip to the desert lands with awe in his voice, I realize all the death and suffering my father had experienced in his life was to get to this point, and even if it breaks my heart he isn't here to see it, that my mother isn't either, I know none of it would have been possible had things been different. And it's difficult to regret that. The end. Tide and Tempest, a Forgotten Lands novel by Lindsey Pogue. Narrated by Hannah Chiclana. Produced in Osis Studios.
That's a wrap on the whole audiobook. I hope you guys enjoyed Samara's story. There is a lot of ups and downs, lots of little curveballs, and I didn't even see some of them coming. So I really hope that you enjoyed the story, that it gave you all the feels, and there is more to come in this world. If you haven't already listened to the other installments, they are linked to the description, in the description below. And yeah, I am so glad you've been on this ride with me. I hope you're enjoying this series. Be sure to listen to the other installments, and there is the sister series. You've probably heard me mention it before. Ruinlands is a 3-book audiobook series at this point, but it's under contract, so it is not available on YouTube. But you can find more information about that pretty much all the places that I am, or in my bookstore, on my website. All of those links will be below as well. So until the next video, be sure you like and subscribe so that you get updates on all my future audiobooks. And I'm so grateful to have you. And thank you so much for taking a chance on my audiobooks. See you next time.